Welcome, everyone, to tonight's live coverage of the Texas 6 special election. I'm Eric Cunningham. Joe Szymanski is here as well, and Harrison Lavelle will be joining us shortly as we start to go over the results that are pouring in. It's expected this will have a lot of results. Obviously, this is a 23-candidate race, a very, very large race. And so we're not expecting to have a decisive winner tonight. What we are expecting is to figure out the top two candidates in this congressional district, which is quickly emerging as a slight battleground district in Texas, at least in the current iteration. The district, as it is, was drawn to be a Republican vote sync, but it only voted for Donald Trump by 3 points. Despite this, Ron Wright, the late representative of the district, won it by 8 points. And we expect this district to stay Republican, but it will be a very competitive and very interesting race in all likelihood. What are your thoughts, Joe, as we wait for some of these results to start coming in?
Yeah, this is the old school Republican seat, the old school Texas suburban Republican seat that has zoomed left in the past 4 years since Donald Trump was elected. It's been pretty clear, I think, to most people that he is quite clearly toxic to these Texas suburban voters in some ways, with the repeated overperformance of congressional incumbents who were Republicans compared to the president, both in 2016 and in 2020. But this is going to be a low turnout special election in a still drawn to be GOP favored seat, which is why we're expecting this to at least have one Republican candidate in the race tonight. There's been some talk that Democrats could get locked out tonight because of the size of candidates. We'll see once we start really getting numbers in if that's a possibility. But of course, the main favorite is, of course, former Congressman Ron White's widow, Susan Wright, who has kind of become the main Republican candidate so far for this race. Also watch Jake Elsie, though, on the Republican side, and for Democrats, the candidate there is Janice Sanchez, who is more expected if that Democrat makes the runoff, she would be the one.
Hey, everybody. Sorry about in the first minute here, but I think that Joe gave a good summary of the race from what I hear.
Mm-hmm. I'll go ahead and show a map of the district. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you can share the map because I wanted to talk a little bit about the article I wrote for Texas 6 not long ago. So, as Joe mentioned, the main Republican candidate is Susan Wright, the widow of former Congressman Ron White here. And there's also Jake Elsie, who ran for the seat in 2018, lost the primary. And those are the two main Republican candidates. But this is a jungle primary after all, so it is going to be a blanket system. And the main Democrat is Sanchez, but at the same time, you also have another minor Democrat named Lydia Bean, who's a small business owner. Ultimately, though, I'd want to take a look at some of the other smaller candidates that have kind of been forgotten here. One of them is Dan Rodimer, who is a carpetbagger, essentially, from Nevada. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not he makes a foothold in the race. The other is Brian Harrison, who served in the Trump administration. And the third, hold on, let me make sure the results are all working here. And the third is Michael Wood. And Michael Wood is endorsed by Adam Kinzinger and his wing of the Republican Party and is a more moderate candidate. So it's going to be interesting to see how much, if any, of the Republican vote he can attract tonight. And of course, there are a couple more minor Republicans and Democrats running. Another Republican that is in the race is Sari Kim, initially attracted the support of Michelle Park Steele and Young Kim, but ultimately had the endorsement retracted as a result of unflattering comments she made about Chinese American immigrants. But again, most of the vote here is in Tarrant County, so Tarrant's where we're going to be looking.
Yeah. And we actually have some initial results now from DDHQ. I want to make sure these are legitimate results and not some of their test results that they do every now and then. But if you pull it up right here, you'll notice they have quite a number of results in it at the moment. And so one thing I want to mention with the seat is it is a very unusual seat in that it two portions. Basically, the seat has two portions. That's the Tarrant County portion, which is parts of Arlington, Fort Worth, the suburban portion. Then you have Ellis and Navarro counties, which are very, very Republican exurban counties connected to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but not necessarily a natural fit for the district. So right now the results apparently are from Tarrant County. So the initial results we're seeing, or you're seeing as we're following along, are from Tarrant County. So that's the biggest county in the district, obviously. So that's pretty important to follow here. But according to DDHQ, 23 candidates in right now. Janice Sanchez in their listing has the lead 16%, followed by Susan Wright 15%, Sean Lassiter, Democrat, at 11%, Jake Elzy at 10%, and then several other Republicans and Democrats going along. And then you have a slew of candidates polling under 1%. Sari Kim, you have another candidate, Phil Gray, Chris Supperin is pulling up the rear.
Yeah.
Which is a notable one. He was one of the electors that voted against Trump in 2016, has since become a Democrat and is literally pulling dead last at the moment.
I think it's also funny to look at someone like Michael Wood, who, like I said, is a moderate Republican, anti-Trump, endorsed by Adam Kinzinger. He's doing better than Dan Rodimer now, albeit narrowly at the moment. That's certainly a fact. And the polling here, we had 3 consistent polls, 2 of which were Democratic internal polls, that showed Susan Wright in the lead with Jonas Sanchez in second place. But certainly, Sean Lassiter's performance is higher than expected, given previous polling. And if anything, Lydia Bean was really going into this expected to be the second Democrat in contention here. And right now, she's the third Democrat. And Brian Harrison is someone else who's doing better than expected. In the polling, Brian Harrison struggled to crack 1%, let alone he's at 8.7% now. Again, though, still very early and only out of the Tarrant portion, which is the most important portion. So we're going to be looking at it, but the rating I made for this race in the article prior to the election was pretty much, again, solid runoff. This is obviously going to a runoff given the amount of competitive candidates running, but we predicted a Sanchez-Wright runoff. Now, we're going to be watching this very closely at the moment. So let me go over to...
I'm half wondering if these are test results, guys. I've been continuously refreshing the Texas Secretary of State numbers here, and we still have nothing in yet from the Texas Secretary of State. So I'm half wondering if these might be...
I was mentioning that because the results to me, Joe, looked really inaccurate when you compare it against the polls. Because, again, Lydia Bean by no means should be in fourth place in terms of Democrats competing. So, and New York Times is at nothing right now, nothing reporting.
Yeah, I'm watching it right now. There is still nothing yet up on the Texas Secretary of State on the Secretary of State site in Texas, considered to be one of the better, which would be one of the better Secretary of State sites for across the nation to look at votes here.
Yeah, so I'm going to see if I can find the Tarrant County site specifically.
Yeah.
So, Joe's right. I just confirmed officially that these are test results. So
okay, very good. Okay, that would make a lot more sense.
We don't have any official results in, and that makes me feel a bit better because the results that we saw thus far looked ridiculous and didn't make any sense.
There is no.
And one thing I'll mention,
Board of Elections. What you want to watch tonight, folks, is Decision Desk, New York Times, or the Texas Secretary of State results. Those are where you're going to want to look for from the night results, folks, if you want to follow along.
Washington Post as well. I've actually been really liking the Washington Post coverage of elections. They do, especially during the Louisiana race. I thought they were pretty excellent with those. But there are other elections tonight that we can kind of go over in the meantime while we're waiting for them. One interesting one is Proposition B in Austin, which would reinstate the public camping ban, which is basically an attempt to ban homelessness in the city of Austin. It's predicted to pass. The early prediction I've seen from a Texas Politico is that it would pass 60-40, and in the early votes appears to be up 63-37. Another one is in Bayard County. They are voting on whether or not to abolish police unions in the city of. They're voting to abolish police unions in the county or in the city of San Antonio. This is one that's kind of been unusual. Liberals are wanting the police unions to be destroyed. Conservatives are wanting the police unions to stay. It's kind of an unusual situation. We're going to follow that election as well, or that race as well. I don't really would call it an election. But yeah, there's all sorts of things going on tonight in Texas that we're going to keep you posted on. In addition to this, there are local elections and other things along that line that we are keeping an eye on, especially out of like Travis County, Fort Worth, Texas mayoral race. I believe has a mayoral race, which is going to be kind of big because obviously the current mayor of Fort Worth is a Republican, but the city itself has become increasingly Democratic, as has Tarrant County itself. Republicans have shown they can compete in these marginal 5 to 10 point Democratic cities, or even some like Miami, where the current mayor is a nonpartisan Republican. This is a similar race. So it's quite possible they hold this, but it's also possible the Democrats use some of that strength that's growing in Tarrant County to really make a push there. Arlington as well, really important one. Arlington is, again, another Democratic trending city. It straddles Tarrant County's border, and it also has a Republican mayor that's not running. So again, another important race to keep an eye on. Plano, Texas, again, you're going to hear the same story a lot. Democratic trending suburban Republican area in Texas might have a competitive race. Finally, Garland as well, where the Republican is running for a second term. So those are all going to be elections to keep an eye on. Yeah, as I said, Brian, elections.
I think it's interesting to look at a district like this, which obviously has, rapidly trended to the left, if you want to put it that way, in recent years in terms of its margin at the presidential level. I mean, keep in mind the district has remained the same since it was first drawn in 2012. Back in 2012, Mitt Romney won the district by 17 points. Even Trump won the district by 12 points in 2016. But just last year in the 2020 election, pretty much entirely due to Tarrant becoming more favorable to Democrats at the federal level, Biden managed to shave down Trump's margin to only 3 points in this district. And I just want to reiterate to you guys, as the people watching, that because of Tarrant County, this race could be competitive in a runoff, and it almost certainly will be competitive in a runoff, but not as competitive, in our opinion, at the present moment as it would be in a full turnout presidential year. It's possible, but at the moment, we still consider Susan Wright a favorite to advance the runoff. And yep, go ahead, Joe.
It seems we were wrong, my friends. It does not look like those results were test results, because the New York Times is reporting.
Yeah, and Washington Post.
So these might not be test results. It looks like these are the actual some of the early vote numbers here in Tarrant. So we'll go through it again here for the folks watching tonight. Jana Sanchez currently in first with 16.4%. That's the favored Democratic nominee. Susan Wright, the favored Republican nominee, is in second with 14.7%. Sean Lasseter is surprisingly the second Democrat on this list, 11.2%. And then Jake Elzy rounds out the top four with 10.1%. So, it's going to be, we'll see here. We got to wait for more results to come in here. This is all from Tarrant County. This is all early vote, we believe, from Tarrant County. But, so still more to come in here, folks. But we're going to be still watching a little bit here.
Yeah, and a couple things I mentioned with these results is it appears Republicans have about an 8-point advantage in the early vote here in Tarrant County. This is significant, obviously, because Tarrant County is the most Democratic portion of this district. And if Republicans are winning here, the margins they're going to produce in Ellis and Navarro are certainly going to inflate that margin. The question will be, obviously, if Susan Wright will have enough support to make that runoff. Elzy could, in particular, have a base in Ellis County. That's going to be important to watch. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, yeah, we've got a big update here from Decision Desk right now. Let me see where these results are from here. They might be from Ellis County. They are from Ellis County. And with some of the Ellis County vote numbers in, Jake Elzy has taken the lead with 6,731 votes, putting him at 15.6%. In second place, folks, it is not a Democrat. Susan Wright, still in second place by about 450 votes over Gianna Sanchez. She has 6,594 votes, or 15.3%. Sanchez is sitting at 14.3% herself. So these results hold. We've mentioned this before earlier tonight, me and Eric. We could be in for a GOP lockout right now if these results hold. But we still have a little bit more from Tarrant, and we still have more from the rest of the night. So we can't say that everything is set in stone yet.
Yeah. Keep in mind, what we're talking about here is these margins are these margins are close. We're talking 15.6% for Elzy, 15.3% for Wright, 14.3% for Gianna Sanchez, and then 12.3% for Brian Harrison, who kind of jumped into the top four here. So 3 of the top 4 here are Republicans, which is very good news for Republicans. They don't want to get locked out.
And again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. This district is competitive now at the federal level, but in this particular runoff, or not the runoff, in this case, in the first round, Republicans are doing much better than they did last year, let's say when Trump was at the top of the ticket in this district. And it's likely
Mhm.
that if it is a Republican versus a Democrat, and if it somehow ends up still being Wright versus Sanchez, and again, we have to see how much is left in Tarrant, even though there's a sizable amount of Tarrant already reporting. But if it's possible, I would say, again, a likely Republican race. Republicans are more favored than usual if it's a Republican versus Democratic runoff to hold this seat. And if it's R versus R, obviously, then you've got another Louisiana 5 on your hands from December 2020 when Luke Letlow ran against State Senator Lance Harris.
You'd have to think Susan Wright would be favored in a 1v1 runoff because of that Democratic factor here. Again, Democrats are going to make up between 40 to 45% of the vote in this district, even in most normal elections. Keep in mind, this is a district Biden lost it by 3, but Republicans held the district at the congressional level by 8 points. That's a pretty substantial margin. That's a really, really good margin for Ron Wright. So this isn't quite a Democratic district down ballot yet, even if it is a little bit more open to it or more competitive there. So it might not be a surprise this will be a top 3. I would say if Democrats can't even get a candidate into the top 2 in this district, this would probably be one of the first alarm bells going forward for the 2022 chances. Normally in these sorts of situations, you want a candidate in the top 2. We've been tracking special elections, and they've not generally strayed too far either way from the vote. I would say if Democrats fail to make the top 2 here, that's pretty embarrassing and is not a good sign.
Another bad
if we're
sign
looking at
for
historically.
another bad sign for a runoff if you've got an R versus D race is Tarrant County, because if Republicans are winning Tarrant County and somehow it ends up being a Sanchez Wright runoff, that's not good news for Sanchez because Tarrant County is the most Democratic portion of the district at this point. In fact, the only
Democratic portions. Yeah.
The rest, the rest of the Ellis and Navarro are safe.
Yeah.
But
You're not winning.
again,
Yeah, there's a
when Elsie
gubernatorial
ran
race
for
in
this
Texas
seat,
up.
when Elsie ran for this seat last time, I think what would be a good example of a potential runoff is the 2018 primary. Ron Wright versus Elsie in 2018 in the primary for the seat. It was literally the Tarrant versus the versus the Ellis and Navarro County coalitions. And, Ron Wright won Tarrant County by enough to win, but he did not win Ellis or Navarro County because that's where the Elsie base was. And ultimately, I think that if it's an RVR runoff, an Elsie versus a Wright runoff in this case, being Wright's widow, I think that it will play very similarly to that 2018 race, just with lower turnout, considering it's an off-year runoff.
And another thing I want to mention with this, obviously, is that Texas has statewide elections in 2022. They're not expected to be competitive. We have the gubernatorial race at safe Republican. If Democrats are not winning Tarrant County, they are not winning statewide in Texas. That's absolutely for sure. So you can kind of, again, count this a little bit if we're tracking forward, which isn't always necessarily a good thing to do. But generally speaking, if a party continually underperforms in special elections, that's where you start worrying about the prospects going forward. This is why New Mexico 1 will be an important race to follow. Do Republicans overperform a bit there? 45% would be a
And
really good
that's going
showing
to
for
be an
them
interesting
in New
race
Mexico 1.
because 40% is really the base in that seat. And I wrote about that in my article, how a good candidate like Mark Moore's, a good candidate for the GOP, and he is a good candidate, could get 45%. And that's a good finish in that district. But going back to Texas, again, the New York Times right now does have almost 80% of Tarrant in. And given that it's the most populous county and the most significant county, once Tarrant is all in, that will really give us a good idea, really, of where the race is going. If Wright's still losing when all of Tarrant is in, then that's a very bad sign. If more of Ellis and Navarro are out, that could theoretically put Elsie in the lead and lock the Democrats out of a runoff. Now, would that allow someone like Wright to win in the runoff? Potentially, if Susan Wright revives her deceased husband's former coalition in 2018, which was pretty much based around winning Tarrant County. Let me pull up those results real quick. Yeah, back in 2018, really what the strategy was in that primary, if you looked at the runoff, and keep in mind that also wasn't runoff. If you look at the margins, let me bring it up here for the viewers. Give me a moment, guys, because I think you'll be interested to see this, because if this holds and it ends up being a runoff like this, for example, let me go to the runoff here. the Republican runoff. Here we go. For May that year. Now, if you look at this by the vote margin percent, you can see that Ron Wright dominated in Tarrant. The reason Elsie lost, and keep in mind it was a somewhat competitive runoff, but this is what Susan Wright will be looking for because, again, if all of Tarrant's in and Elsie manages to keep Wright, like I said in the article, below what she needs in Tarrant and simultaneously is able to take first place or even second place heading into the runoff by Ellis and Navarro, both of which Elsie did very well in the last election, considering Ellis is his home county, then that's what we could be looking at. The same dichotomy, the same divide. And the reason Wright won is because he won Tarrant by such a large margin. And if you look at where the votes are cast, Tarrant effectively cast most votes in this runoff, and we can presume that would be the case next time. I mean, even if you look at the last election, and I guess I'll also throw this out here just in case somehow we still get a Wright v. Sanchez traditional style runoff between a Republican and a Democrat. First off, I would look at the 2020 margin here. If you look at deviation, If you look at the vote margin percent, Tarrant was still somewhat close. Wright outran Trump in this portion of Tarrant and outran Trump overall in the whole district. But again, Stephen Daniel, the Democrat, was still able to win here. So if Republicans are winning the combined vote over the Democrats, 53-47 here with 78% in, that's a very, very bad sign if it's a traditional runoff. And that would back up our likely Republican rating that we had, because Democrats would need to be winning Tarrant right now to have an even somewhat reasonable chance in an RVD runoff.
I have actually something big here. Texas Board of Elections is finally reporting on their website. They've only had results from Ellis. I honestly think we may be looking at an R lockout here if you just look at these numbers. One is that's really concerning for Susan Wright. She's polling third in Ellis County. Right now, she's at Jake Elsie's at 30%, Brian Harrison's at 21%, Susan Wright's at 17%. So that's not great. I don't think Brian Harrison is going to be a big factor here. But if Elsie is pulling these numbers in the other county, Navarro, on top of the already existing Susan Wright numbers in Tarrant, where she's polling second with 14.7%. Sanchez is first with 16% there. So in other words, if she's polling above 17% in Ellis and Navarro, she's polling 15% in Tarrant, while the other two aren't doing that well there. We may be looking at an R lockout here. This is an interesting one to look at. I mean,
it's kind of surprising, but at this point, I think it's more likely than not that we have an R lockout. I would agree.
Well, Harrison, I want to hold on that. We still do have to wait for election day vote. We do not know how that's going to go in a place like Tarrant County. We do not know how that election day vote's going to go. So I'm going to hold off and wait personally on that to say, Jana Sanchez, with Decision Desk, with early vote in from Tarrant and Ellis County, she is only about 450 votes behind Susan Wright right now.
But I would still be cautious because in terms of what's not reporting, it's only about 20% of the remaining vote in Tarrant and in Ellis. So most of the vote has already been cast in both those counties. That's my only thing. I understand your caution.
But I think, I'm going to be cautious here. I want to see what that last vote looks like from Tarrant. If she's not in a good position, though, and we still don't have numbers from Navarro, I would be very concerned if I was the Democrats. If Deanna Sanchez is not, if we finished counting Tarrant before we even get any results from Navarro County, that could be a big problem, I think, for Democrats if Deanna Sanchez is not in a good position after that.
Yeah. Again, one thing I'll mention here, Brian Elections, a frequent watcher, I notice him in the comments a lot, is mentioning that Republicans are over 70% in Ellis. Trump got 66% in this county.
Yeah, Republicans are doing very well as a whole. I mean, just look at Tarrant, like you mentioned, Eric.
Yeah. Ooh, and we've got some addition. Yeah, again, I'm going to look at some of these other elections that are coming in because obviously we have this one and many others coming in. One election that I think one of my Texas friends just sent in is Lubbock County effectively has had a vote on banning abortion, and they seem to have passed it by a 64-36 margin. So that's a pretty major result right there. So Austin is banning the homeless, and Lubbock is banning abortion. Different priorities, obviously, speaking of both of these areas. But yeah, we're just waiting for more results to come in. Keep in mind the Texas elections website. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to talk about Wood when you.
Yeah. The Texas election website only updates every 5 minutes, whereas Washington Post and DDHQ both have more results in and seem to be getting doing much more quickly in terms of what they're getting in. But yeah, you go ahead and talk about Michael Wood, who was one of the interesting candidates running in this race, who was not nearly where he needs to be to win this thing.
Well, no, certainly not. And it's not about winning this because, again, his bid has been rather quixotic if you look at it. I mean, overall, he's basically saying, can I run and win or do somewhat well in the sixth district as an anti Trump candidate who's trying to push for an overall change to the GOP in the same way that you've seen somebody like Adam Kinzinger attempt to change the Republican Party? And that's why Adam Kinzinger happened to endorse him. Now, Michael Wood is at 3% total right now, according to Decision Desk. If you look at Tarrant, he's at 3.03%, which places him narrowly ahead of Dan Rodimer and Sari Kim, both of whom are more controversial, more conservative candidates that are running to the right in this primary. But if you go out to Ellis County, which is significantly more Republican, because again, Tarrant County is really the only Democratic portion of this district, and down ballot, it isn't incredibly Democratic, as we saw in the last election. But in the Ellis County portion, Michael Wood is actually below 3%. He's at 2.9%. And again, not at all getting what he needs to win and underperforming slightly in Ellis County at the moment when compared against his numbers in Tarrant County. But I think what's more interesting out of Ellis is Susan Wright behind Brian Harrison. Brian Harrison, again, former figure of the Trump administration. He is someone that we really didn't see coming as a potential GOP frontrunner. You know, Jake Ellzey, we saw in the polls. Jake Ellzey was always in third place, roughly behind Susan Wright and Janice Sanchez. But someone like Brian Harrison above Susan Wright in Ellis County. Now, we expected Ellzey to win Ellis because it's his home county, but someone like Brian Harrison doing this well in Ellis and at the same time also doing fairly well in Tarrant and ultimately polling about 12% district wide, placing him in fourth place. That's something we really didn't expect ultimately.
Mm-hmm. And I have some other election results I'd like to mention here that's really interesting right now. These mayoral races that I've been talking about. Let's go ahead and go over them first. Oh, do you have something, Joe? Okay, so really quick on these. Garland, Texas, a suburban area, as I mentioned before. Republican candidate incumbent Scott LeMay is at 79%. That's obviously really good for Republican. Plano mayor is all Republican. So it's all Republican in Plano, Texas. So that doesn't matter. Arlington, Texas, Republican endorsed candidate Jim Ross is over 51% right now. So that's a pretty big deal. He has the endorsement of the incumbent Republican there. Arlington is one of those Democratic trending suburbs you mentioned before. Finally, in Fort Worth, top three candidates here. Deborah Peoples is the Democratic endorsed candidate, 34%. Right behind her is Maddie Parker, 32%, and Brian Byrd at 15%. Both of them Republican. Republicans are actually above 50% for all of the Fort Worth city Republicans, or for city, these mayoral races here. So again, if you're looking for long-term Democratic trends in these areas, you would expect cities like Fort Worth to start flipping in these mayoral races, even if they're nonpartisan. That's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing Republicans actually holding it fairly well in the city of Fort Worth, which is the most Democratic portion of Tarrant County.
Yeah, I think those mayoral results are going to be really interesting, but it does kind of tell the story that, even in some of these suburban areas where the vote has certainly started to swing left, at the top of the ballot at these presidential elections, at least with regards to 2016 and 2020, that result down ballot has, struggled to, be seen there. We've seen that across the nation with down ballot races, that they've been taking longer to, regards to national trends. They've taken longer to happen. So I think we're kind of seeing a similar pattern happen here in Texas, but it would still be good news for the Republican Party to hold these mayoralships. It's always good. They're always good for benches, especially in these smaller city-like areas in places like Fort Worth and Arlington. Always good to hold mayoralships there. That's good for the bench.
And keep in mind, even in the city of Houston, which is the most Democratic portion of the county, and with a horrible candidate in Tony Busby, Republicans still only lost that race by 12% in the city of Houston, which is the most Democratic portion of Harris County. This is similar to Charlotte, kind of in a way. It reminds me of North Carolina, where for a while, the moment you knew Mecklenburg was gone for Republicans, just straight up gone, is when they stopped being competitive in Charlotte mayoral races. For a while, Republicans were finishing within 10 points in Democratic races in the city of Charlotte for the mayor's race, even as obviously Republicans were losing it nationally by wide margins. Since Republicans have stopped being competitive in that mayoral race, it's really tanked for them, specifically in the wedge portions. This is something that's actually pretty important to pay attention to with these mayoral races.
So real quick, I just wanted to bring us back to Texas 6 for the moment. And there was a question that said runoff prediction. So I'd like to propose two things to this first. Number one, my initial prediction going into this election was a runoff, obviously a runoff, because we've got too many competitive candidates under a blanket primary system. So solid runoff. That's something we all agreed on. But I predicted, and this was backed up by the polling, a Susan Wright and Sanchez runoff, which would then be likely Republican and likely be won by Susan Wright. Now, that's potentially possible because we still have about 20% of the vote out in Tarrant, 24% of the vote out in Ellis, and the whole county of Navarro has yet to report any votes. But again, at the moment, one of the possibilities that's looking increasingly more likely, given how much of this election has been constituted of early votes, is an RVR runoff with the Democrats locked out. And something like that could definitely come as a result of Jake Elzy either finishing first above Susan Wright or finishing in second with Susan Wright, depending on how Tarrant goes. But it's a possibility now. And I'm beginning to think, I'm not saying it's increasingly likely, but I do think it's very much possible that it could happen depending on how the rest of the votes come in. But it seems that Dan Rodimer's carpetbagging bid has been a failure.
As we all expected it to be. Maybe
that is very true.
Maybe he'll head to that special election up in Ohio 16th for his next opportunity to rebrand himself as a Midwestern steelworking man. So
yeah, I mean, he has the money to do it, Joe. So why not?
Anyways, but yeah, we're still waiting for just an update here, folks. We're still waiting for a next update in results here. We still haven't seen anything. The Texas Secretary of State website is, by the way, updated officially.
I would also wait for Navarro
to include the early vote numbers from Tarrant County. So the Texas Secretary of State website is fully up to date, along with the New York Times and Decision Desk HQ right now.
But yeah, again, I would wait for Navarro as well because it's even redder than Ellis, and it's another county where LZ is expected to do well.
Ooh, here we go. I think we may be getting some. Oh no, all the website has done it just updated to have the results coming in from Tarrant County. So disregard that.
Although overall, this election should be wrapped up relatively quickly. I mean, we've seen pretty rapid fire reporting of results, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we're already like 80% reporting in the two counties.
Yeah, so we're waiting really for Tarrant. We're waiting for Navarro, of course. That's going to be another important one. And again, to mention the two other local results that are important, or actually three. I'm not sure. The police union referendum in Bayard County is about dead even right now. We're not sure whether that will pass or not. It appears Austin has voted overwhelmingly to ban basically homeless encampments, which is take it what you will of that policy, but it appears they've done so overwhelmingly. And in Lubbock, Texas, again, equally overwhelmingly voting to basically ban abortion in Lubbock, which is a Republican strongly Republican city in West Texas. Good answer here. Do Dems try back LZ in a 1VR runoff? If they are insane, yes, that is what they would do. In all likelihood, they would take the rational approach and back right. Like we saw in New Orleans, where you had a top two race there, two Democrats, and the Republican areas in the district overwhelmingly voted for the more moderate candidate. It's possible that LZ could get support from Democrats, but I'm not sure why that would happen, unless there's some sort of issue Democrats in the county have with Ron Wright, which they don't appear to, given he did fairly well, and you would expect his widow to do roughly the same. It's fairly, I don't see a reason why they would back LZ in an RVR runoff. And if Democrats are going to comprise even 30% of the vote in a low turnout runoff, that is still important. That's an important amount of votes. We saw that in the in the Louisiana race.
Last December, most of the Democrats, whatever portion there were, that came out to vote after Candy Christoph got cut out of the first runoff, a lot of them came out to vote for Luke Letlow against Lance Harris, who pretty much only won his home parish, and that's it. Got destroyed.
Yeah. Now, there are examples of people going against
Carter.
him.
Republicans helped Troy Carter win his runoff. I mean, it's true. The minority party, even when it's locked out of a runoff, can certainly make an impact.
And it's important, again, to note, people always go to California, the 2018 race. Republicans backed a far-left Kevin De Leon, but again, that was a special circumstance because Dianne Feinstein had basically gone out of her way to irritate Republican voters by going after gun control, again, and the whole Kavanaugh thing, which really soured her with even moderate Republicans. So it's no surprise that Republicans there were more willing to vote for Kevin De Leon just to spite Dianne Feinstein, but they specifically had a grudge against her. I'm not sure Democrats in Texas 6 have a grudge against Susan Wright. Now, if they perceive Elsie as more moderate, maybe, but he's also running as the more Trumpy candidate in a way. Wright is kind of running as the more catch-all, Republican candidate here.
Elsie is not, I mean, I don't use the term nut job lightly, but Elsie is not the same type of conservative that someone like Dan Rodimer is. Like, let's make that pretty clear. When we're talking about Elsie, I think that's important to make the distinction because I don't want to 100% characterize him as the candidate that is going to lap up all of the more conservative portions of the Republican electorate. I mean, that's what's happening at the moment. But, it would be interesting. I'll say that. It would be really interesting if Democrats decided to back Elsie. I'll say that. Wouldn't make much sense considering the Democrats are voting in higher concentrations in the Tarrant County portion, where Elsie is weakest. And as someone mentioned in the comments, since Wright does have the Trump endorsement, it'd be interesting to see if the Trump endorsement actually holds up.
Mm-hmm. Although it would be kind of, you think it would be embarrassing for him to switch his endorsement after endorsing her. That would be kind of
it would look very bad as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that obviously, and in addition, when we look at it, I mean, it's mainly going to be interesting to see. I've watched this election for two things. And there are two things that obviously aren't going to play that big of a role. But number one, Michael Wood, how well can Wood do? And number two, when we look at this race, looking at how effective the Trump endorsement is in Republican primaries. In this case, it's not a Republican primary because it's an open blanket primary, but it's going to be interesting to track as a gauge of how much influence former President Trump has over the party, how well his endorsed candidates happen to do in primaries, because they had a successful rate of victory in primaries in 2018, but I don't know. When you're out of the White House, it's going to be interesting to see. And if Wright somehow doesn't get into an RVD runoff and is in a runoff against Elsie, and Elsie somehow wins, which isn't as likely given the way the district is structured, that would be a big blow to President Trump, former President Trump, and his endorsement.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is the Kansas governor's race next year. The primaries between, I believe, Derek Schmidt or whatever is the attorney general there running against Jeff Colyer, the former governor who lost his primary to Chris Kobach. It's going to be interesting if Trump decides to endorse against Colyer, which I think is pretty likely at this point. How much influence will that have, especially if somehow Trump plans to run for president in the next cycle? Will it be enough to stop Colyer?
Yeah, I do actually want to answer one question here since we're getting some really, really good questions here. Omar H. said, jungle primaries are terrible. Yeah, this is a possible example of a jungle primary kind of messing up. It looks like anywhere from, right now, Democrats are at least 40% of the vote in this district, but could be locked out of a candidate entirely because the top two are Republicans. This is definitely a flaw of jungle primaries. It doesn't affect one party or the other more or less, but it certainly is a flaw. And we saw this in Louisiana just last time with the two Democrats running in the seat, although in that case, the Republicans only combined for like 15 to 20% of the vote, completely negligible. Here, 40%, that's a lot of votes. And this is just kind of the way it's done in a lot of the South, is you have these weird jungle primaries.
And a lot of people will look at a jungle primary or a blanket primary, as it's also known, and they're going to say things that they act like this type of primary is going to be beneficial. But ultimately, a lot of the reasoning comes from, well, you allow all the candidates to participate on the same ballot, regardless of party, leave it up to the voters. And it's true that the two-party system has its limitations, and that typical closed primaries where you end up getting a general election between each party's nominee, not exactly going to be the most ideal situation. And a lot of people that propose jungle primaries believe that kind of conflict can be averted, but ultimately it actually decreases representation if you end up with only one faction having two candidates running against each other, because two candidates of the same party make it to the runoff. So you try to solve a problem and end up with a worse situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, this is why I'm a fan of party primaries, and particularly closed party primaries. I know that's a controversial opinion. I do think having it where both parties are confident that their voters are deciding their candidates is important. I know Virginia Republicans have long complained, I think without any evidence, that Democrats are voting in their primaries because it's an open primary state. You can vote for whoever you want. If it was closed, they would not be having a convention right now. I think that's absolutely certain. And they would be having a normal primary like the rest of the country. The main point here is primary laws matter, and how we operate these things matter. And jungle primaries there's a reason most states don't use them for actual elections. There's a reason Georgia wanted to get rid of them. There's a reason that only 2 states actually use them in statewide elections. They have downsides, big downsides. Ranked choice voting is now more of the niche thing. I know approval voting as well, which I like approval voting, is becoming more of a possibility here, but or is becoming more popular in some of these cities. I like approval voting, as I've said before. These laws matter, and you can have results like this if this does hold, and Republicans do hold 2 of these seats, to the 2 seats here. I think Democrats should rightfully be irritated that they didn't get a candidate here. They're gonna have to vote for 2 Republicans. I know I'm a Republican. I wouldn't really be thrilled about voting in a race with 2 Democrats. I'm not even sure if I would at all, to be honest, even if it is a moderate versus someone who's more left. I would prefer to vote for a Republican, even in a doomed scenario. Even if the Democrat is going to lose in this race, I'm sure most Democrats would rather be voting for a Democrat. It's an interesting paradox, to be sure.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I'll highlight this.
If I can
Yeah,
just
go
make
ahead.
a comment, I know we're focusing on Texas tonight, but Virginia, I've gotten more updates on that. Obviously, next week will be the voting day for the convention, but do not expect results to come out of that convention. They are officially counting every ballot by hand from this Virginia Republican convention. They are to appease the Stop the Steal crowd. They are counting every ballot from all 42 convention sites by hand in a ranked choice voting system. So you can tell me whether or not a primary could not have gone any worse than that. I've been told that I should not expect governor results until Wednesday or Thursday of that week. That's just an update of what I heard.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to get back, I would like to have a discussion about this, because not only are we seeing Brian Harrison doing better than expected on the Republican side, but Lassiter is doing better than expected on the Democratic side. I mean, really, besides Sanchez, the only Democrat that was getting any attention here was Lydia Bean. No other Democrats received endorsements from anybody else. So Lassiter performing this well has certainly thrown the wrench in Democratic plans, especially in Tarrant. Lassiter's doing fairly well compared to Sanchez.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely running, I think, as a more progressive candidate, if I recall right. Health insurance, education, immigration, that sort of stuff, climate, all that sort of stuff. In this sort of district, it's worth noting, she's a Black woman. In a district like this that has a substantial Black population, that may matter in this sort of district. We tend to focus on Janice Sanchez, but people do vote on their last names. If you're it's easy to remember. This is a diverse district, relatively speaking, as is Tarrant County and much of Texas as a whole. So someone running an appeal more to an African American crowd could certainly have an appeal in some of these more African American portions of Tarrant County.
Yeah, I have to say, I pretty much agree there with Eric. These are weird special elections are weird. Weird things happen sometimes. In special elections, because they just sometimes weird things happen. It's just kind of how it goes sometimes in these type of races. Or am I hearing that we have Navarro early vote in?
Yeah, Navarro early vote, and Susan Wright is back in the lead. This is really good for Susan Wright. If I'm Susan Wright, I'm very, very happy with this right here.
Yep, that's what I was just about to say.
This is not good news. I have to say, this is not good news for Democrats, because Jan, I know, like I've said, we've got a lot more to come in Tarrant County. You've still got a lot of election day vote to count, but that is not the type of numbers that you want to start with early vote in Tarrant already in. For Jana Sanchez, down by 1.7 percentage points, when this race could potentially be close, that's not a type of numbers that you want to see right now. I have to say. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's certainly good for Susan Wright. And I mean, again, this gets us closer to an outcome, because according to NYT, that drop we saw Navarro comprised about 67% of the total vote. So what we have left is really going to be the minor amount of votes that decide this incredibly close race. That's certainly good for Wright, puts Wright back in the lead. Those Navarro numbers are certainly not what Jake Ellzey wants to see in this race. But again, Wright is only above Ellzey by 10 votes. And at this point, it's looking more likely that we could have, depending on what's left in Tarrant and whether or not it's more Democratic, an R versus R runoff between Ellzey and Wright, or at least a runoff between a Republican and a Democrat like Sanchez, if Tarrant manages to boost Sanchez back into second place. Now, that doesn't mean Democrats are going to win the runoff. It just means they might get to them.
Yeah, I would say if I'm a Republican right now, I'm thrilled with these results. I would say most Republicans would absolutely be thrilled, seeing what's going on right now. I don't think anyone expected this level of vote splitting among Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, I think right now the split with Sean Lassiter right now, if that split continues in Tarrant, and if election day vote is potentially more favorable to Republicans, like I said, this is where we could start to see problems right now. This is where we could start to see problems for Democrats if that election day vote is slightly more even among the same levels for Republicans. I think Sanchez might be in some trouble here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's been pretty clear for a while now, because ultimately 2/3 of the vote has pretty much already been cast. So it's pretty much going to be left up to the 1/3 of this vote to decide the election. And when people are voting randomly, which is probably what happens when you don't know your candidates, who knows what's going to happen? Whichever candidates come out on top of this runoff, it's going to be a close finish. It really is, because right now it's just incredibly close. I mean, even someone like Sanchez, the Democrat, is just slightly behind.
This is a Biden plus 3. This is not a Biden plus 3. This is a Trump plus 3 district. This is a Trump plus 3 district. If you're Democrats, you should not be getting locked out of this race. Just consolidate around a candidate. Republicans have a fractured field.
Also, yes, that is true. But you have to keep in mind, still, the district is more Republican down the ballot. But you're right. Democrats should certainly not be locked out of a district like this. I mean, this is not the same type of district as a Louisiana 5. It just isn't. But yeah, I mean, even by the top of the hour at 9 o'clock, we'll probably have a better idea of what's going to happen with this race. And by 9:30, we could, have a pretty good idea to a projection potentially by the end of the hour. It depends. Yeah. This race is moving fast. If we get that last third of votes in by 9:30, then we'll probably have a pretty good idea about which candidates are going to be projected to advance to the runoff officially.
Yeah, I mean, you think about this here. Lydia Bean was touted as the other Democratic candidate here. She had the endorsement of the AFL-CIO of Tarrant County. She's at 4% right now. Sean Lassiter had apparently 2 endorsements from Wikipedia, 314 Action, which endorses scientists, and something called Collective PAC. Those are her 2 endorsements. Jana Sanchez had the most of the brunt of the Democratic support here. I think, honestly, if you look at the precinct results, what I would guess this boils down to is that black voters were voting for Sean Lasseter. That would just be my gut guess here, based off of absolutely nothing other than I can't think of any other reason why the vote would be split here. I honestly can't.
Yeah, and again, I think what Dave Weigel said on Twitter, I think it's also the randomness factor. I mean, when you don't know which candidates to vote for and you're possibly politically apathetic, then you're probably just going to randomly select in a race like this. And a lot of people are probably randomly selecting Wright because they know Ron Wright, because Susan Wright is his widow. And name recognition is the most important thing when it comes to winning elections. It just is.
And, Michael Wood's at 3%. Dan Rodimer's at 2.6%. What a night.
Still waiting for
and
any
again, it's
election day vote, though, folks. So just pay in mind for that. We are still waiting for any election day vote at all.
Okay, but still, I mean, the election day vote is only 1/3 of the total vote, so it's going to decide the race. Joe's right about that. But contrary to what some might expect, in many of these counties, almost 70, if not 80% of the vote is early vote.
And again, I would say from this, if I don't want to extrapolate off of one special election, but I would think this is an outright embarrassment for Democrats if they don't manage to get a candidate through this primary. Again, if it were Republicans, I think people would say the same thing. It's really, really embarrassing in a competitive seat to not get a candidate in a jungle primary. But especially here with a fractured Republican field, clearly fractured. I mean, you have Susan Wright, who got a bunch of endorsements, but hasn't taken the same thing that Julia Letlow was able to do and just consolidate the field. Elsie holding strong, Brian Harrison pulling well. And I mean, when the three Republicans here are polling at 15%, how hard is it as a Democrat to get 16%? One Democrat out of a field of like no other notable Democrats aside from Lydia Bean and apparently Sean Lasseter. It's not good. It's not a good performance tonight for Democrats. And I just tweeted this on Twitter. I mean, a bunch of these candidates who the media really did hype up are not doing very well at all. Lydia Bean, 4%. She had the union endorsement. Michael Wood, never Trump Republican, 3%. Or anti-Trump Republican, I should say, because he did vote for Trump. 3%. Dan Rodimer, 2.5%. Sari Kim, 1%. Chris Suprin, who was a former Trump elector, who's now a Democrat, is dead last at 0.1%. These candidates all probably got more attention than Sean Lasseter.
Him switching parties and Rodimer carpetbagging. Oh, wait. Sorry to answer this question. There was polling, and I did talk about this in my article. 2 Democratic internal polls, both of which showed Sanchez in second place, Wright in first place, and Elsie in third place. All the other candidates were at like 1% or less. So that's why Lasseter doing well and someone like Brian Harrison doing well. That's pretty shocking to me because they were included in the polls and they just did not do well at all. So.
I'm going to go back and look to see if I can figure out how this Tarrant portion voted in 2020. I imagine Republicans lost it by a fairly large margin, given their performance in the district as a whole. But right now they're winning it by around 7 to 8 points. This is probably the first night I would say we've had so far of these special elections where Republicans have definitively overperformed baseline expectations.
That is certainly true.
I think that would be absolutely fair to say.
Especially in a district like this.
Because
this district, after all, is not a safe district like the last few.
even if Jana Sanchez were in the top 2, this would still not be a good night for Democrats because you should not be losing that portion of Tarrant by 8 points, even in a low turnout special, to all Republicans, losing it to all Republicans combined, of course. Let's see if I can find their election results, and then I can kind of explain to you what we're seeing here. Nope, it's only showing the current election. Dang it. I'm gonna text my Texas buddy and see if he knows. But yeah, this is a pretty big night if you're a Republican. This is a pretty okay. So Ethan Chen is saying that Ron Wright, who won the seat by 8 points, lost it by 5% in 2020.
Yeah, that's true. He did not win the Tarrant portion. He lose it by 5.
So Ethan Chen, who is our friend eCaliber6 on Twitter, in one of the group chats we're in, is saying that Ron Wright lost this portion of the seat, the Tarrant portion, by 5 points. And he won that seat by 8. And then my Texas friend is saying that portion of Tarrant went to Biden by 12 points. And Republicans are currently carrying it by a large margin, 7 to 8 points. This is a very, very bad performance. I don't think there's any bones about how bad this is.
Yeah, so far, most certainly unimpressive. Definitely unimpressive so far tonight by Democrats. Certainly an underperformance so far. You cannot deny. I think even with just the early vote in, you cannot deny it. Certainly seems like we are heading towards a underperformance tonight. No, it's gonna be kind of, we're gonna just, again, the wait now is just really waiting for that election day vote to start coming in. Once we see that, that's the same thing happened last weekend with the Louisiana 02 runoff. Waited a little bit for the mail-in vote, but once we started getting election day vote, night went pretty quickly, and I think we'll probably expect to see the same thing here. Once we kind of get that election day vote counted, we'll start to see the final results come in here pretty quickly to see that happen. I mean, Eric, what do you think might be one of the more likely scenarios? Do you think we'll still see Susan Wright finishing first? Could Brian Harrison make a surprise jump into one of the 2 races, runoff spaces? What's the position of LZ? What's kind of your thought process going through your head right now, Eric?
I mean, for me, I don't think Trump changes the endorsement, but I do think this runoff will be very interesting because, again, those Democratic votes are going to be very important in this runoff. Assuming it's a top 2, it could very well not be. We could be seeing, for some, Sean Laster could just tank and we just get Jana Sanchez back in the top 2 after the election day results come in. But I would still rather be Susan Wright if it were the top 2. Ellis County is important. But obviously the Tarrant portion is very, very big, and it's very, very important in this seat. Republicans carry those other 2 counties by very, very wide margins. But the seat was only Trump plus 3. With a 12-point margin in that Tarrant portion. So here's a good response here from Avian Justice. I'm using Decision Desk HQ and the Washington Post.
Also,
those are
New
the
York
2.
Times. New York Times also tells you how much is reporting. Currently, just to update you, 79% votes are reporting in Tarrant, 76% in Ellis, and 67% in Navarro. So again, that 3% of the total votes still out that are election day votes are really going to decide this race. And that's what we're waiting on. Once those come in, we'll be able to make a definitive decision.
Yeah, and keep in mind, the 2% in is not 2%. It's 2 precincts reporting. And really what they mean by precinct is that this is all early vote. So this is not election day vote. Typically, when they're talking about precinct results, they're not going to say a precinct is in when the precinct is not in. They'll say something along the lines of 69% of the vote is in, which is what the case is right now. Or at least it was when I most recently checked. So that percentage of the vote is in, but no precinct is entirely in, right? Because there's no precinct that 100% voted on election or on early voting, which is what we have right now. So that's kind of the difference we're talking about here, is that when we're talking percentage of the vote that is in, and it's over 2/3 of the vote that is in right now. In fact, probably over 70% at this point. Yeah, and it's 77%. So Washington Post is confusingly using the word precinct. This is not precincts that are in. This is early vote that is in. 77% of the vote is in right now, according to the Washington Post, according to Decision Desk HQ. So that's 23% that's left for any of these candidates to change their fates.
And again, this race is already closer to being over than beginning. I mean, the early votes were counted and released very quickly. So I'm really eager for these election day votes to come in because they'll hopefully give us an outcome we're looking for here. And ultimately, the county with the fewest remaining votes to be reported is Tarrant. So Ellis and Navarro, especially Ellis, could very much make a slightly bigger difference in the remaining election votes in Tarrant. We'll have to see.
And I'm trying to pull up the exact Tarrant County portion here to see if the exact results we're talking about.
I
they
have it up
percentage total. Yeah.
I have it. So currently, and again, this is updated as of recently, but Sanchez is winning the Tarrant portion with 79% reporting in Tarrant. 16.3% for Sanchez, 14.6% for Wright, and Sean Lassiter is at 11.2%. So again, the fact that Wright hasn't managed to establish a pretty solid lead here in Tarrant so far, especially given Lassiter cutting into Sanchez, who would presumably be winning by even more without his presence in the race. That's not exactly a good thing for this first round, but overall, Republicans combined, given they have a fractured field, outvoting the Democrats, that's very, very good news for the future for a Republican versus Democratic runoff. Again, this is the only Democratic portion of the district, and Republicans are currently winning it.
Yeah, it actually looks like that lead for Republicans is now up to closer to 9 points, or no, sorry, to 7 points. By my calculation, 53.2% of the vote is for Republicans in the Tarrant County portion. 46% is for Democrats, with the remainder going to a Libertarian and another party candidate. So they're carrying this by a 7 point. Sorry, they're carrying for this by a 7 point margin, basically. And again, that portion of the district, the Tarrant County portion, which is the most important portion of this district vote wise, voted for Joe Biden by 12 points and for the House Democratic candidate by 5. And again, this goes to what I'm saying earlier. This is just not a good performance so far. Jana Sanchez could still sneak in there if the early vote, or sorry, if the election day vote, I keep getting those confused. If the election day vote comes in, she could sneak through, but it's quite possible, that this goes different. Oh, and good response. Sorry, Daffodils. I want to just reach out to her or him.
Thank you so much for the subscription. Yeah. We appreciate it.
Yeah, really appreciate it. You can follow also our website as well, electionsdaily.com, where we have a lot more stuff, Twitter account as well. All sorts of things for you to do if you like what we're doing. So give us a follow there. And you see our names here as well if you want to follow us. So thanks for your support. Really appreciate it. And I think it's 67 people on right now. This is one of our biggest. 71. Good Lord. What? Pretty big night, I'd say. I thought this would be pretty boring election, but this is actually turning out to be very, very interesting.
It just seems to be how that ends up sometimes, doesn't it? The nights that we expect the least become the ones that are the most fun to watch. That's just, it kind of seems like how it happens just sometimes. Of course, we're going to keep doing this as long as we can keep going here. Usually, if there was a Republican primary, or if they were doing something sensibly in Virginia, we would be covering the results of that convention next week. But of course, because of them, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, the fact that they are refusing to do anything but hand count the ballots, all in one centralized location with armed guards and cameras watching said ballot counting. Yes, I said armed guards. It's so we're not going to be covering that next week because we will not be getting full results on that until probably Wednesday or Thursday night afterwards. So I think the next night you guys can watch for us, I believe, would be the New Mexico First special.
Yep.
On June the 1st, I believe, would be the next day.
After that, the runoff in this race.
Well,
and the June primary for New Jersey as well.
And don't forget the June primary for Democrats in Virginia as well, where they will be deciding all their nominees, as well as many House of Delegates, primary races as well there. So it will be a busy month.
A couple things I wanted to answer in the question section here. This is technically still a primary. It is a crazy jungle primary or blanket primary, as some call it, but technically it's still a primary, just a form of primary voting that I personally disagree with. Honestly, I think ranked choice voting would be more effective in ensuring representation of the populace than something like a jungle primary, which can yield stupid outcomes like having again, there is no reasonable way in which a Trump +4 district, where you have a significant contingent of Democrats, should have its special election race between two Republicans. I mean, it's the same thing in a Democratic seat or a Republican seat if it's somehow the Republicans get locked out of it. I mean, either have closed primaries where each party will have a nominee, or do ranked choice voting, which will likely yield a nominee for each party.
Yeah. And again, one thing I want to mention here is if a candidate for some reason got 50% of the vote here, they would have won this election and would be seated, but no one is going to be getting 50% of the vote in a 23 candidate field. But a couple other ones I do want to answer here. Yeah. A couple other ones I want to answer here because we're having really, really good audience participation tonight. Mahib, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Why is DDHQ 0% in, but Washington Post 77% in? The reason is Washington Post is counting the total number of votes in, which we know, or at least the election officials know how many votes have been cast in this election, and they've determined 77% of that vote is in. DDHQ is saying 0% of precincts are in. So what Washington Post is incorrect when they're saying 77% of precincts are in. It's 77% of the actual vote that's in. But there are no precincts that are 100% in because there are in all of the precincts, at least one voter showed up on election day. And the only votes that are in right now are these early votes. So you can't say a precinct is complete because no precincts are complete, but the vast majority of votes have already been counted in this race. Another one from Andrew Owens. Are you guys following the Scottish election or international elections in general? Yes, we are. Where we have articles. We have an article coming out this week. We had an additional article on the website earlier this week about it, and we're looking into having some of our contributors do a coverage of the election. Now, keep in mind, UK elections work differently than the ones here. They're usually called immediately. That is, when all the votes are in, they announce the winner. So there's no coverage of the election because it goes from knowing no votes to knowing the winner. So it may just be a pre-election and a post-election special. But yes, we will be covering those on the website, and we'll probably be covering them in some form here. We're also covering, we have an article came out today about Indian elections. We had one about a Pakistan election. So yes, we do cover international elections here. And we try to make sure that we have international representation. Actually, a good number of contributors are from the United Kingdom. I believe about 15% or so of the contributors we have are from the UK. So just that, since we have some really good stuff here.
We love our British friends here at Elections
Yeah.
Daily. We do. We love our British elections. And I just saw someone comment that we should be covering Peru. Don't worry. One of our top contributors, Armin Thomas, I promise you, he is all over this. Expect Peru coverage coming in the next week. Well, I'm sure we'll have an article about that, about what is turning out to be a very interesting presidential election.
Interesting.
Countries. Interesting to put it.
Yeah. And by interesting, we mean one of the candidates is basically a fascist and the other is basically a communist. And we're not exaggerating here. That's actually literally the case.
Yeah.
Basically. Are we saying basically? Or I don't think it's basically if it's fact.
Yeah, it is.
One of them is
not sugarcoated.
One of them
guys.
is
the case. It is
one
the
of the candidates is the daughter of
between...
One of the candidates is the daughter of the former right-wing dictator of the country, and the other candidate is basically Nicolas Maduro, again, just this time in Peru. So, yeah, that's a very interesting election. And if you're still waiting for election results again, we are waiting for them to come in. We're still stuck at the 77% thing right now. I assume they're tabulating the election day votes. They're going to dump them all at once or in large numbers.
I promise you folks that once we see some type of election day numbers, you will see me waving my hands to get Eric and Harrison's attention. So trust me.
I'm getting kind of annoyed that these election day votes aren't coming in because we're running out of things to talk about. We're just talking about fascist candidates running against communist candidates in Peru at this point, which is interesting. But I'd like to get back ideally to our 6th district election. And once we get these election day votes, we can call this race and call it a night. But because it's as long as they're holding out, we don't really know what's going on.
Yeah. And again, I'll respond to a few more comments while we have time. Max Miller, yes, we probably will be getting some articles on German elections. We have a contributor that's covered German elections in the past. I think Armin is probably going to cover those if he hasn't already. I believe he mentioned he would.
Oh, Kraz is actually covering those.
Oh, Kraz, yeah, because he speaks German. Yeah, you're right.
Well, no, I speak German.
You speak German. Sorry, you speak German. Yeah. Kraz has an interview actually coming up with a German official that will be very interesting. You should keep an eye for.
I set up the interview for him, but he will be hosting the interview on here, which is interesting. But I served as Kraz.
We're not going to spoil it. Yeah. We're not going to spoil who the interview is with, but it is with a German official who is speaking German. So. Any other interesting? I mean, we've talked about kind of the mayoral stuff that's going on.
Well, actually, just to confirm, I think the interview is going to be in English because Kraz doesn't speak German.
Oh yeah, but the person he's interviewing is German.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And for those who aren't familiar, Germany could be getting a Green Party government. They could be getting one of the first Green Party governments in the world. If polling is correct, the Greens are emerging as the predominant rival to the more conservative or center-right coalition that's been running the country for quite a while now. So, really, really interesting. Really, really interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, these election day votes can just come in anytime soon.
I think we've got an interesting question here, though, from Jacob Smith. What do we think TX-06 looks like after redistricting? Well, let me share my screen with you here, folks, and let me show you one of the cool things we've got here at Elections Daily, which is, of course, our friend, our redistricting radar project here. Let me just try and share my screen here.
And we will be updating this project for those who aren't familiar. When we finally get the 2020 census results in, we'll be updating it to have those as well. So this is our Republican gerrymander here, folks.
I mean, it might not be the exact way that we see our map. We tried to go for the worst possible gerrymander you could do here. But this is certainly a case of what you could see something like Texas 6 look like, in which it takes in a lot more of these deep, dark reds here outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Way more than it has now, and way less of the Arlington area than it does today, of course. That's, just part of protecting the incumbents and everything. If you want to look at a fair map, what it would normally look like, a Texas 6 would normally look like, that's probably what it would look like right there. But we're being honest here, folks. In the state of Texas, you know, it is not going to be Republicans who have the since they have the full control here of redistricting. You know, we're going to be.
And I have a more compact version I can show as well, which is one I just drew earlier today.
Please go
very
right
similar
ahead.
this is kind of similar to the current one. It kind of shifts the orientation. So again, this is Tarrant County based. The 6 takes in basically all of Arlington, Mansfield, and then takes in, it doesn't take in Ellis or Navarro County. Instead, it shifts over and takes in several of these other counties right here. Again, the candidates who are winning probably aren't going to be living in these portions. So Johnson, Hill, Bosque, Ellis takes all those. And the end result would have voted in 2016, would have voted for Trump by around 21 percentage points. Probably closer to 10 to 15, somewhere in that range in 2020, but still a very, very, decisive Republican advantage here. And it also tells you how Democratic that portion of the Arlington portion of this district is. Because if I go ahead and highlight this just by itself, that portion voted for Republicans by about a point in 2016. In this election, it might have voted for Joe Biden by closer to 10 to 12 points, 15 points. It's also difficult to say with numbering what the district would look like, because honestly, this district doesn't make any sense, its current configuration. So there could be a Texas 6 if it was a fair map. It just wouldn't look anything like this current version of Texas 6. It could take in, more portions of, other areas around, snake around, taking part of Fort Worth, or taking just the rural portions of the county, in which case it would still be a Republican-leaning seat if it took in the western portions of Tarrant County, which are still very, very Republican. Lots of different possibilities there. Although the only thing that's certain is if Susan Wright wins, Arlington will be in the seat because she does live in Arlington. She lives in Arlington. She lives in that area and she lives in the city. So at least a portion of the city would be in the seat in order to retain her incumbency if she were to be the candidate here. If it's the other candidate, it could be from Ellis County. And yeah, for those who are wondering, we're still waiting for the election day results. We're waiting for them. So if you have questions, if you have questions, ask them. And just since we have time, since so many of you really like what we're doing, we do have a Patreon. We've just started it. We're going to start rolling out the benefits this month. We have a Discord we're starting up, ad-free podcast access. We're going to work on that. If you really, really like what we're doing, you can subscribe to that. If not, that's fine. We just like you subscribing to the channel. We're basically just doing this on our own. We don't have any funding from anyone. We don't have anything like that on that one. So doing that helps us kind of take us to where we want to go with this website and with what we're trying to do here. So regardless of how you support us, we appreciate it. We really do. We've never actually had anyone say on stream that they subscribed to us. So that's pretty cool. We're really, really, really excited about that. I want to start the Discord this week, Brendan. We just have to do a little bit of work on that, but we have people who subscribed last month, so the last week of last month, and we want to get that benefit in before the next month. So that's definitely something we're going to be trying to get through this week, I would imagine. Get that started up. If you're interested in that. If not, that's fine. Just continue subscribing, watching, go to the website, follow us, do whatever you like. And we're still waiting. If you hear us say we're waiting, we're
about a question about the San Antonio mayoral race. Doesn't seem like we're seeing any surprises there tonight. Looks like the incumbent, as we kind of expected, the incumbent run, Nierenberg, seems pretty dead set on headed towards a pretty solid re-election. Early vote has him up 63 to 31 over Greg Brockhouse so far right now.
Mm-hmm.
You were gonna mention something there before I kind of went off on a little tangent there.
Mm-hmm. Oh no!
Real quick, guys. I was just going to mention a lot of people have asked about New Mexico 1, so I thought I would just briefly talk a little bit about New Mexico 1. So just give me a quick second. I wanted to pull up my article because I briefly mentioned New Mexico 1 in there because that's really the next big race that we're going to have coming up. And New Mexico 1's interesting because really the floor for the Republicans in a normal year is about 40%, which is what they got in the last election against Deb Haaland. And now that we're going forward onto a special election in the off year, um, the potential for Republicans to do better is certainly possible. Now, it's not going to be easy for Republicans to win a seat like that. That would be a massive upset. But a competitive race is a possibility. It's likely Democratic at the moment. That's our current rating, but that could change. The Republican candidate here, Mark Moores, is a very credible candidate. He's a state senator, and he was selected by a pretty compelling majority by the end of the Republican Party committee vote. Now, Melanie Stansberry, as a state representative and as the Democratic nominee, had a much less decided, if you will, victory in the Central Committee vote runoff. Only beat Antoinette Cedillo Lopez, the other Democrat that made it to the runoff, taking only 51.2% of the vote there. So certainly not as compelling of a certification in a Central Committee runoff, but still it's a Democratic district in an off year, so turnout will be iffy. It could be a somewhat close race, but we're keeping it at likely Democratic for now. That said, we don't expect Stansberry to overperform Haaland's benchmark. So either she'll hit the benchmark or underperform the benchmark, but overperforming it is likely out of the question, given that Republicans will actually be targeting this race this time, and they haven't targeted it at all in the past, at least not recently.
And what I would say, my baseline for a good Republican night in that district, which is a Biden plus 23 seat, about a 60 to 37 seat for Biden, would be 45% for Republicans. It would be a really, really good night for them. This is based in Albuquerque. Republicans used to actually be really good in Albuquerque. If you look at the previous 2008, up until that, it was represented by Heather Wilson, who was ran a very, very strong campaign in 2012 for the Senate in New Mexico. She was the representative of that seat. So out of the two seats, this is probably the one that Republicans would be more likely to do better in. But again, it's Albuquerque. It's actually the opposite area of where you would think Republicans would do better. It's a Democratic trending urban area with a large suburban population of white voters who are kind of shifting the opposite direction from right now. So it would be, it would be fine. It would be 40% good would be fine. That'd be an overperformance for them. But 45 would be my target of where Republicans would want that vote to end up to be.
Where are these election day votes? That's the question right now.
Yeah, this is kind of odd. Like these should be in by now. Texas is usually really good.
I can't believe I'm surprised they've taken this long because I actually have to head out soon. So it's kind of unfortunate that we won't know the outcome before I have to go.
Yeah, we'll still be here. Me and Joe will still be here. We're going to cover this as long as it takes to figure out these results. One of actually our Texas friends just mentioned that somehow, basically, you're in Texas. You're supposed to report whatever vote you have in every 45 minutes. And somehow they snuck in a 0 vote update, which is not an update, regardless of what they say it is. That is not an update. So we really have no idea. Texas is usually really good with getting these results in quickly. Granted, this is no New York. It's not like we're going to be waiting a month to figure out who won this race. But we usually expect, a little bit earlier, a little bit better from Texas. So they're disappointing us right now, I would say. Not that we want to get out of here quickly, but we would like to know who won this race or who the top two are going to be, I should say. This is a really good question. Why is rural northern New Mexico so Democratic? 2 reasons. Reason number 1, Native American voters. Native American voters lean Democratic, especially in the West. Arizona, in fact, I would say you could argue Arizona Native American voters are what flipped the state over to Biden, not suburban whites. Native American voters delivered that margin. New Mexico is the same thing. Very large Native American population. The northern district, the 3rd district, I believe, has the 2nd largest Native population in the country behind Arizona 1, which is basically drawn to include as many Native American voters as possible. The other reason, Hispano voters. These are people who have been there for generations. We see a similar thing in Colorado, except those areas have become more Republican. Hispano voters have been there for hundreds of years. Settlers, they're a distinct community, they're a distinct group. And so, yeah, that's basically the reason why is Hispano voters, which are a subset of Hispanic voters, and Native Americans. The rural Republican voters in there still vote very Republican. There's one county in northern New Mexico that is very Republican, but the rest of them tend to be more Democratic. Where Republicans really saw gains with Hispanic voters was in southern New Mexico, so that's closer to the Texas side of the border. Fracking, oil extraction, socially conservative, more border politics were in play there than in the northern portion of New Mexico. It is worth noting, of course, that New Mexico is an interesting state for Republicans because it's one that had been competitive until recently. It's a relatively poor state, and it's one that is, potentially one that Republicans want to target again in the future. No Trump talked about it, and nobody believed him, but in the Senate race, Mark Ronchetti did do pretty well. So, if Republicans can break in with those rural voters, the rural Hispano communities in the north, they can be more competitive in the state.
Yeah, and before I might be able to come back later on to cap off the stream if the election results do come in by 10. But for the brief time period that I'm off, if it is for the entire thing, and I greatly regret that, I think Joe has an update.
Sadly, I have kind of an update. No official numbers, but I'm being told by our good Election Daily's good Texas friend, who's been helping us with Texas results for most of 2020 as well, has messaged me saying that an update should be happening in 5 minutes.
Oh,
so
good.
We should be getting an
9:30.
update with election day numbers at 9:30. That's what I've been told. Hopefully that's the case, and we can maybe then make some more interesting noise. I'm not going to say we're going to be able to make a call or anything, but hopefully we'll be able to.
Well, it depends on how much of the election day vote comes in. If it's a significant amount, then we could potentially make a call, but we have to wait and see. We'll at least be able to make a better inference.
But again, in the meantime, in the next 4 minutes, I guess, ask us whatever you want. We probably will have time to answer it. We've kind of went over these mayoral races already. These results don't really seem to be in question in any of these races, with the exception of Fort Worth, which I believe Fort Worth does run off. So if it would, and at this point, the top two are so far beyond the others that it does not appear likely that the runoff result would change there in terms of which candidates are going to the runoff. Although the Arlington race could potentially slip back under that 50% threshold, but currently the Republican candidate there does have that threshold there. Okay, good question here from Dave John. Who would gain out of redistricting in 2020? Depends on who you ask. Republicans control redistricting in more states than Democrats do. And the reapportionment does benefit Republicans in terms of the states it went to, although not by as much of a margin as thought. So I think the general conventional wisdom is Republicans could net 5 seats off of reapportionment and maybe additional ones off of redistricting. An example would be North Carolina. Democrats gained 2 seats because of redistricting mid-decade. Republicans could draw one or both of them out and get an additional Republican there. That would be a net of 3 seats. Ohio, likely Republicans will lose a seat, but who knows? It could vary a little bit. States like California, though, are going to be important. California has an independent commission, and the commission does appear to be a little more Democratic than have a Democratic lean. So could that mean that Republicans are drawn out there? We don't know. There's only about a dozen of them in California, so that even if they draw out half of them, you could still make that up in other states. New York, Illinois are going to be important to follow on the Democratic side, and on the Republican side, look at Kentucky. There's Kentucky and Tennessee have Democrats that could be drawn out. Florida has Democrats that could be drawn out. Additional ones like that. So overall, I would say it could be possible that Republicans, just off of redistricting and off of reapportionment, gain anywhere from 5 to 12 seats at minimum, just off of those two. But again, we don't know. That's before we account actual race flips, where the seats have actually flipped, not because of redistricting, but because the seat flipped, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and we should be getting results that all-important update in 1 minute.
Yep. Real quick before Arjun ready.
A significant amount, it could definitely decide the race, or at least give us the information to lead to a call later on.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to answer this one question real quick here from Arjun Reddy. Thoughts on Prop B results in Austin? I don't want to be rude to anyone, but pretty typical policy you would expect from some more affluent white voters would be to abolish homelessness, I guess, is basically the rough equivalent of what that ruling is. I don't think it surprised people that that passed. Whether or not it's good policy or not, we'll see. It seems, I mean, just for me, it seems a little bit cruel to ban homeless encampments. I live in a community that does have homeless areas, and I don't think that's really a nice policy for them, but I don't want to get into policy too much. We're not a policy program here, but that's just a potential outcome of that. We don't know who that impacts politically or anything along that line. That just, it's just what happened. People got to live with that vote now. And we're at 9:30, so we should be getting an update here any moment.
Yes, we should.
Ugh. Wow. Okay, here's something interesting. According to, in the meantime, while we're waiting for this, Nathan Rakich, Base Ballot on Twitter, Texas 6 early vote breaks down 62% Republican, 38% Democratic.
That's very good news for the GOP.
Yeah, that is excellent news for the GOP. Again, remember this is a district that went in the previous House race was only a 52 to 44 race. That was Republican plus 6. This is breaking up to be Republican plus 14. Or not even 14, 24, actually. I got my math wrong here. So we'll see if Texas is having another fake 0 vote update, which is, again, not an update. Updating with 0 ballots. You got to apparently have to report what you have right now.
Not
you
can't a real wait. Update. It doesn't actually. You can't just say, "Oh, we updated with 0 ballots." 0 ballots.
Yeah, that's a bit of a gimmick right here. A real quick comment, I guess, while we're waiting from Carolina Social Club. I'll answer this since I'm from North Carolina. No, I don't think Laura Trump jumps into the Senate primary. There's multiple reasons for this. There will be other Republicans running in. Obviously, she also has multiple young children under the age of 6. This is a primary that's going to require extensive fundraising, talking to people, going all over the state of North Carolina, which is a number of different media markets. Basically, just on a practical level, she would need to not be with her kids for a large amount of time. And I don't see any evidence that that would be something she would want to do. The other thing, how would I handicap the race as it stands right now? I think McCrory has the edge out of the 3 candidates. Walker has disappointed in fundraising, to put it lightly, and he's not gotten the public name ID you would expect. McCrory has a built-in name ID everywhere in the state. It's fairly popular with Republicans in general. I would give him the advantage in that. In the primary, at least. Democratic primary might be more interesting than the Republican side, though, because they've got a number of genuinely top-tier candidates, at least for them. Not top-tier in terms of competitive, but in terms of a Democratic primary electorate, they have 2 candidates which are appealing to very different sets, and Sherry Beasley and Jeff Jackson. Jeff Jackson appealing to more internet-connected, liberal urban voters, and Sherry Beasley connecting to more African-American voters, establishment Democrats. And then you have a third voter, Erica Smith, who is known in rural North Carolina, the Northeast, and is a progressive candidate. So you have 3 different types of Democrats all running right now. That are all polling pretty high in the polls, roughly comparable to each other. I'm going to go ahead and say that Texas has lied to us again and is not updated.
They have certainly not.
There's no new stuff in.
Very frustrating.
I'm going to have to go. I'm going to go talk to the manager of Texas and go ask them what's taking so long. Our Texas friend, quote, full quote, "I'm throwing hands. We don't know what's going on." Yeah. On New York Times, it says it updated 1 minute ago, but has no updates. That is probably the 0 vote update where they said they have an update, and the update is they've added 0 votes. That is not an update. I'm sorry. That's a lie. That's literally a lie update.
Oh, there has been an update.
has there?
Navarro County went from 67% reporting to 73% reporting. And now
Oh.
Susan Wright and Brian Harrison are tied Susan Wright is 2 votes ahead of Brian Harrison in Navarro. But nope, a useless update. So thank you, Texas. We gained 3 more votes. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to temporarily go, and I will be back at 10 o'clock. And I wish I could stay, but unfortunately, because all the elections have seemingly taken place on Saturdays, they have not worked very well with scheduling. But I think Joe and Eric have this, and I'll be back. So thank you guys, and I'll see you again soon.
Yeah. So again, we're confused here. What's going on? Apparently, you guys like what we're doing, though, because there has not been a drop off in audience. So I guess keep shooting us questions, and we'll, because I may have to get another cheer warrant.
Maybe to make sure we keep going here. Maybe I'll do like a little tap dance or something. Hey, just to keep people updated. I mean, if anyone has any questions, keep asking questions here. If you have any questions about Texas. If you have any questions about Virginia 2021, I know I can certainly have a lot of things to say about that. So if we really want to get into the weeds here while we're waiting for Texas to stop being annoying, ask away. Ask away, folks. If you want to, this is now basically becoming Ask Eric and Joe Anything stream with hopefully from Texas results on the side. Okay, we got a question from Dave. Dave's asking, how do you feel about the PA Sen Democratic primary? It seems very close. It is going to be close, Dave. That's a very good point. I think it is going to be close. The announcement, the report from Politico makes it very much sound like that Connor Lamb is going to take the plunge and run for that Senate race, which is probably not good news for how his seat is going to look past redistricting when it happens in Pennsylvania. Probably does mean it is going to get redder, whether that means it's taking in more of Washington County or more of Mercer County. It is looking like it is going to get more Republican. And but the problem is, of course, you've got John Fetterman, who is also from the western part of the state, winning right now. And then you've got, who's running in that part right now. You've got Malcolm Kenyatta really is the only southeastern Pennsylvania candidate right now, but there are continued rumors of Chrissy Houlihan, the Democrat from Pennsylvania's 6th district, or Madeline Dean, the Democrat from Pennsylvania's 4th district, potentially hopping in. And if one of those two hop in, folks, then we are in for a real ride in that primary. I'd be very interested. And then from our good and great friend, a long-time listening here, Jonathan Reutenberg, one of our good friends. He's been a long-time follower and listener of the site. He's asking about, is Chaz Nuttycombe, a competitor of ours at C Analysis, correct about Pete Snyder being favored in the convention? I think Chaz is right that Snyder is favored. I don't know if me and him agree on how favored he thinks Snyder is. I still think Glenn Youngkin and Kurt Cox, to a certain extent, both have a more than decent chance to win it. But I think I would still give a slight edge to Pete Snyder at the moment. And then we've also got a question from Sumit about, was Trump just a bad fit for Virginia, or has the shift really just come to a point right now where Virginia is a double-digit seat? I don't know. I think that's the best question I can give right now. I think we'll see what Virginia Beach and the Richmond suburbs look like in 2021. If those numbers can come back slightly, I think it is still definitely a lean blue seat. I don't know if maybe it's truly a double-digit Democratic seat, state. It's hard. If Virginia Beach comes back to normal levels that it is at, close to, 1 or 2 points either way, that means it's not going to be a double-digit state. So, and then I think, Eric, I think a better question for you here. You're kind of the better redistricting expert than me here. What is the most likely outcome of the Fajita Strip districts and redistricting? He's kind of think it seems unclear to him here. So you go ahead on this here, Eric.
So my guess would be Texas 23, Texas 11 will go in and absorb areas of El Paso. So it will become a Hispanic seat majority, probably a little bit above 50% as required by the VRA. 23 will probably focus more on San Antonio and then along the border. So again, majority Hispanic. I would expect Republicans to gain just in the Rio Grande Valley. So that's the 3 fajita seats, I would expect there to be 1 seat probably stretching Brownsville to into Hidalgo County. I would expect that to be there. The question is, I don't know the rest. Republicans could draw 2 Rio Grande Valley seats, but I think it may be more likely they draw 1 after the new update. Regardless, if you draw a more compact version that does not have the fajita strips, you would have at least 1 Republican seat there that is majority Hispanic by a very large margin, about 60%, that would have voted Republican even in previous elections before this. So the question will be which of the Texas RGV Democrats are likely to survive. Vincent, one of them is already retired. Vela, who represents the one that goes from Cameron County up to Corpus Christi, he's already said he's retiring. Henry Cuellar is very popular, broadly speaking, among the general electorate, less so among Democratic primary voters. I think he would be the one that Republicans would be most likely to save. And then Vicente Gonzalez is basically gone. He's toast. Monica de la Cruz Hernandez is setting up to run in that seat. It'll be redrawn again, even in a fair map. The seat would lean Republican, and he'll be toast. So that he's out of the 3. Vela's retired. Gonzalez is going to lose, and Cuellar is the one Republicans want to keep, but Democrats would love to replace with aggressive. So we really don't know. I think what will be interesting, though, is if the trend in Hidalgo County, Cameron County, Webb County, Maverick, Star, all of these counties along the Rio Grande Valley, if they continue to trend right, Republicans have a typical off-year election performance in Texas, 60 to 65% of the vote. You could see those at the gubernatorial level be closer to an even race, which would be not great for the Democratic candidates in that area. That's just my general lay of it right now. I need to draw with the 38C map. I need to see how that changes things. But it is very possible to keep the current alignment of Hispanic seats there, which is, I believe, 6, because you have 2 in El Paso. You have 16 and 23. You have the 3 seats in the Valley, and then you have an additional one and 2 additional ones in San Antonio. So you can keep all of those, but make a couple of them Republican. Oh, multiple other ones here. Sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, I think I'm not as big on the maps and the redistricting as Eric Harrison and Adam and Kraz are. They've been doing it for a lot longer than me, so they're a lot better at it than I am. But yeah, I think I didn't hear anything that I wouldn't disagree with here, though.
Mm-hmm. Additional ones, Virginia redistricting. Joe would probably. We don't know.
Yeah,
it's a
quick
commission.
Virginia's a weird state because some people thought at the beginning of the decade that because of how massive the population growth has been in Northern Virginia that they could gain a 12th seat. That obviously did not occur due to bleeding in the southwest portion of the state. That increase did not occur. So we're kind of going to be a really interesting position here where Democrats are going to basically have to find some way to probably fit 3 seats in that Northern Virginia area. If you had 4, then you would probably see the Arlington/Fairfax seat, the mostly Fairfax seat, then the Loudoun plus Fairfax seat, and then the Prince William County seat. That's that's probably the question I'd be willing to ask right now on that. It's going to be weird. I think some parts aren't going to change that much. I don't think the 6th district is going to change that much. I don't think the 2nd district is going to change that much from what it is right now. Maybe taking a little bit more of Chesapeake, but I don't think it's going to change that much from what it is right now. The big changes are going to be, the 1st district. We're going to have to see how they're going to redraw that. I think the 5th district is definitely going to change a lot. There's a question about whether it will or will not keep Charlottesville. The 9th district will likely now include Roanoke. The 7th district, again, a lot of questions. Will it take in Charlottesville or will it not get Charlottesville in the district? It's going to be a lot of interesting questions. I actually think Virginia, especially now with the new redistricting commission that runs the drawing of its congressional maps and state legislative maps, I think it's actually one of the more interesting states to watch in redistricting because I think there's a lot more unknowns than in a lot of other states in the country.
Mm-hmm. And just to comment from what I know is a lot of Democrats, just on a purely community of interest perspective, even Charlottesville ones do not want to be in the same seat as the Richmond suburbs. That's just something I've heard from Virginia Democrats that I've talked to in the know. that they just don't like that as a community and would not want to be in the same seat as Richmond suburbs for whatever reason. You could still draw a competitive mountain seat even without that. You could draw in Lynchburg, Roanoke, Charlottesville, draw a competitive mountain seat. Or sorry, I should say Shenandoah Valley seat, more accurately speaking. But it would be less of a sure thing for Democrats than, although it could be a threat for Bob Good, who is, or Bob Bad, as we like to joke.
Yeah, Bob,
in terms of
that's gonna be a
candidate
real
quality.
question. If that 5th district keeps in Charlottesville or not. If it does, then Good is going to be in substantially more trouble in the next decade than if it doesn't. If it doesn't, that becomes very rapidly a safe Republican seat compared to what it is right now.
Mm-hmm. And a few other questions. I want to respond to this from Blue. Election shuffler update. So we have wanted to update the election shuffler. The problem is the person who made it, who did a really great job. Her name is A Lot of Oranges. You can follow her on Twitter. Fantastic work. She's in 2 projects with her. She's excellent. If you need anything web design, she's fantastic. The problem is her computer broke, and we cannot have any updates to the election shuffler until her computer is fixed. So we had planned on adding a precinct update to do additional stuff like that. We could certainly make a population scaler in all likelihood. There's ways we could do that. But we cannot do that until her computer is fixed, and we have no idea when that will happen. So apologies there. You can continue using it as is. Although, again, I think you could simulate population growth with the turnout shifts, but I get you would really want a population shuffler, especially using census trends or the updated census numbers. We'll take this all into consideration, but we just have to wait for her computer to get fixed. So that's unfortunate there, but it happens. But again, we were waiting for her to do that because she did a great job, and just genuinely incredible work.
Yeah, I'm just seconding that. April did a fantastic job. When she was working on on the election, on both the election shuffler and helping with our with the graphics for our redistricting radar. She was fantastic. And if once she gets her computer back, we will be making sure to recommend her to a lot of people for the work she's done with us.
And some additional questions here, just going through the interesting ones, because we have so many, we can't really respond to all of these. Ooh, okay, we may have something. Yes, we have something. We have an update.
We do.
An update.
Tarrant
Yes.
Hooray. Tarrant County update, ladies and gentlemen. Hooray. Victory. Okay. 80% apparently of precincts reporting in Tarrant County now. We have election day results. It is not good news for Democrats. Yana Sanchez still in 3rd place. After a lot of election day vote in Tarrant, Yana Sanchez is still in 3rd place. Susan Wright has retaken the lead, by the way. She now leads by about 1.5 percentage points with 8,257 votes. Big problem here, though. Jake LZ still in 2nd, 7,487 votes, 287 above Gianna Sanchez, who has exactly 7,200, and which is now basically confirming that Republicans will get a spot in this runoff no matter what happens the rest of the way. Brian Harrison is in 4th place as a Republican candidate. That is so I'm not going to confirm any of the candidates yet, but at this point, I think we can confirm at least the Republican Party, as expected, will have one of the 2 runoff spots in this race.
Mm-hmm.
So hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. It is going to be close. There's still more to count in Tarrant, but if Decision Desk is correct, and that's 80% of the vote in Tarrant, that is not good news for Democrats, especially with more of Ellis County still yet to report its election day vote, and with Jake Elzy being from Ellis County and getting good margins there. If that last 20% from Tarrant, it's going to have to be good. I'm not going to lie, folks. It's going to have to be good for Yana Sanchez to maybe take that 2nd spot. But a big update there from our good friends at Decision Desk, folks. They're very good friends of ours here at Elections Daily. So,
yeah. And again, what we're looking at now, the total percentages, according to DDHQ, Susan Wright at 16.1%, Jake Elzy at 14.7%, Jana Sanchez at 14.1%, Brian Harrison at 11.8%, and then Sean Lasseter, who was the Democrat we mentioned before, kind of come out of nowhere at 9.1%.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now. But yeah, I would say that it's going to be close for that second spot, but I don't think that is something, quite honestly, that Yana Sanchez wanted to see, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be really interested. I hope they put precinct results out for this. They get the precinct match done pretty quickly, because I want to compare the Democratic the areas that voted more for Lasseter with African American population.
It looks like we got another update in here from somewhere.
Oh no, this is horrible. This is horrible for Sanchez.
I don't know.
No. Whoa.
It looks like they're saying maybe like more early vote came in from Ellis or something, but their decision desk is still saying 0% reporting on precincts. But Jake Elsie has gotten an extra a couple hundred votes now from Ellis. I don't know if that was late reporting or something, but update here: Susan Wright still at 16.7%, but Jake Elsie has increased his lead to almost 600 votes over Yana Sanchez right now. He leads. He has 8,056 votes compared to Sanchez's 7,465 votes. I don't know where we're going at right now. I don't know if that was late numbers from Ellis coming in, because Decision Desk, again, is not reporting that as precinct results, but those Ellis results definitely changed. If I, again, check here correctly, yeah, those Ellis results definitely changed. So I don't know really what's happening here right now, but that is a big problem, I think, for Yana Sanchez. If that was more early vote, not precinct vote, that is a problem for Yana Sanchez.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a look to make sure this is correct. But apparently, New York Times says almost all of Tarrant County is in, which would be really, really bad for Yana Sanchez.
I think we have to remember, though, with the differences in early vote, New York Times has not always been super accurate.
Yeah.
On this margin, I trust them here. I don't think there was a whole lot of mail-in ballots in this race, just because of the very lax restrictions right now that Texas has fairly when it comes to COVID-19. So I don't know what the mail-in ballot situation was here, but if that is quite a lot of Tarrant in, this is a problem here. This is a problem for Democrats. So yeah, this is not something that is not the report, though. I think wanted to see here tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned this before. This is a seat that was won. Joe Biden lost the seat by 3 points. Democrats lost it in the House by 8. By any means, this should be a relatively competitive seat. In at least relatively competitive by, we're meaning it should be competitive to some degree. Republicans are winning the vote here by a pretty large margin, even in Tarrant, where they lost the portion by 12 and 5 in the presidential and House race. So not a great night. And again, you like what we're doing, apparently. 83 people watching right now, so we're going to keep going. I would say if this pace continues, we're looking at a Wright versus LZ runoff, in which case will be fascinating in terms of the politics of this. That Democratic vote, they may not get a Democrat in the runoff, but that Democratic vote will be important. However many Democrats do turn out will probably be deciding this race.
And that was the same thing in the Louisiana 02 runoff, quite honestly. It was a Democratic v. Democratic runoff, but the little vote that Republicans had there almost certainly helped Troy Carter get that extra boost he needed to win that runoff election that only happened about a week ago. Certainly that helped him there. So, we're hopefully going to start to see results come in now, hopefully. And, this is the type of stuff, it does. Okay. So it looks like they've officially updated it now. That was election day vote from Ellis. So it says only 30% of that vote is reporting compared to 80% in Tarrant. Remember, Tarrant is, though, a much larger county, and we still aren't getting any election day vote from Navarro County, but finally some of the election day vote is being reported here tonight, folks. So we are getting closer to the finish line.
And again, I'll just go ahead and again mention, I'm going to call this our Turkey Awards, the Turkey Awards in terms of the candidates who kind of got media attention that have been doing pretty terrible. Lydia Bean, 4% of the vote. She had the endorsement of the AFL-CIO of Tarrant County. That's not great. She's not even the fourth best. She's the fourth best Democrat right now, behind Sanchez Lassiter and Tammy Allison. Then you have Dan Rodimer, who was polling 2.6%. He had his big campaign ad, which had him with a fake accent riding a bull, except he wasn't actually riding the bull, it was someone else. He's at 2.6%. Michael Wood, the anti-Trump Republican, 3% of the vote. Then you got Sari Kim, 1.1%. She had the support of, she's Korean. She had the support of Young Kim and Michelle Steele in California, the two Asian American Republicans, Korean American, who were elected in 2020, but they rescinded their endorsement after anti-Chinese comments were made from her, pretty racist stuff. And then finally, Chris Suprin has 62 votes right now. He's dead last. He was a anti-Trump. He was a elector in 2016, voted against the Republican slate, is now running as a Democrat, and that did not appear to go well. I knew this was probably going to go bad for him because his account has 14,000 followers, but his campaign account had eight followers for his campaign account. So no surprise there. And we're now just kind of waiting again to see what goes. But I'll go ahead and update some of these mayoral races, which again are really, really interesting. Deborah Peoples is still in first place in Fort Worth. The second place candidate, Maddie Parker, is a Republican. So it looks like a Republican versus Democratic nomination there. Arlington, Jim Ross is narrowly avoiding a runoff right now, 50.02%. But Republicans have an outright majority beyond him of the vote here. So there's really no risk of them losing this, I don't think. I don't know who the second place candidate is here, but that's a really good performance from them. Plano, this is a R versus R race, does not matter. And then Garland, again, another Republican race, 78%. So these are really bad night overall. Let's see. Additional one. Oh, good question here from Brady. I'll let Joe answer this. Who is the favored candidate in the LG and AG race?
I see it right below that. He says for both the GOP and Democratic nominations.
Ooh.
I think. I'll start with the AG race because I think that's a bit more clear. I think. You look at the AG race on the Republican side. It's probably the one that we'll know first because it does seem like, I think to everyone, that Jason Miyares, who is a House of Delegates district from the Virginia Beach area in the northern part of Virginia Beach, he's wrapped up a decent amount of the wings in the party. Most people expect that race to be the first one counted. A lot of people expect Miyares to get a majority by potentially even the first ballot, or at the very least the second ballot. They expect him to get a majority. So I would be very surprised if Jason Miyares was not the Republican candidate from Virginia for Attorney General in Virginia right now. Obviously, on the Democratic side, it's a little bit more uncertain. Incumbent Mark Herring is running against getting a progressive challenge from Jay Jones, who is a delegate from Norfolk. Jones has made some noise, mainly because he's gotten support from Ralph Northam. Some people think that that's because Northam is still particularly salty about Herring calling on him to resign in the blackface incident that occurred about 2 years ago now for Governor Northam. But I would still say that Herring is significantly favored there. I haven't seen any type of polling that would say Jones is in a good place right now. Obviously, you've still got about a month to go there. Anything can happen on election night, especially in low-polled primaries. Anything can happen, but I would be surprised, again, if Mark Herring is not renominated. I think the LG races on both sides are more interesting, though, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on those. On the Republican side, you basically have three candidates who are actively serious about the nomination. Current delegate from Virginia Beach, Glenn Davis, former delegate from Fairfax, Tim Hugo, and former delegate from the Hampton Roads area, Winsome Sears, who is an African-American female. Sears and Hugo have taken up the more conservative lane. Sears has been endorsed by people such as Bob Good, and also ran the black vote for Trump in Virginia in 2020. So she has a presence there in that community. While Tim Hugo is also running a conservative campaign, he's been endorsed by a lot of the Southwest Virginia area delegates, a lot of the more conservative figures in Virginia politics, people like Morgan Griffith, but we have another update though. So I'm going to stop right there though. And I'm going to see where this update is from. And it looks like it is more election day vote in Ellis County that has only expanded the lead for both Susan Wright and Jake Elzy here. Susan Wright now leads with 17.1% and 9,466 votes. Jake Elzy has 8,364 votes with 15.1% of the vote. Yana Sanchez has fallen again. She's fallen to below 14% of the vote. She has 13.8% of the vote right now. So, Eric, if you want to go ahead and update that, then.
They have additional votes?
Oh, they have additional votes.
Wow.
Which is so 17.1% now. Oh, we're still 17.1% now for Wright.
Yeah, I think we can we say at least for certain that Susan Wright makes the runoff? Can we say I think for sure Susan Wright makes the runoff?
I think we can confirm that. I'm willing to confirm that. So we're going to make one call here, folks. Susan Wright, the widow of former Representative Ron Wright, who sadly passed away of cancer this past winter. We project here at Elections Daily will make the TX-06 runoff to be conducted later in the month. Susan Wright will be making the runoff in this race. It is all but assured at this point.
And that's a big difference from earlier in the night where it looked like she was the one who may be closer to being eliminated than Elzy. But right now, she's got a pretty decisive edge. Even by decisive meaning 17% of the vote, but in a jungle primary, pretty big deal. I don't see anyone at this point picking up the slack that she has right now. I mean, she's pulling on what she needs to.
Yeah. So again, but I'll go back to the question now on the LG race. Like I said, it's on the Republican side. I think Glenn Davis might maybe have a slight advantage right now, but I could see I think that's a pretty clear toss-up race. I think it's unlikely to see anything right now. And then on the Democratic side, I have to say the same thing. You've got three candidates there who I think are quite serious about getting the nomination. Delegate Sam Razul, Delegate Hala Ayala, and then Norfolk City Councilwoman Andrea McClellan. I think it's potentially to be very close between those three. I know some people have been sleeping on McClellan. I wouldn't. She has a decent base to draw from both Norfolk and the Hampton Roads area and Virginia Beach area. She's the only candidate from that area, and she's the only candidate who I think is really making a play in that area for those votes in the Democratic primary. That could help boost her numbers, and with a potential no-vote split still possible, even with Delegate Elizabeth Guzman dropping out to focus on her delegate campaign, I think the LG races on both sides are probably the most interesting primaries, I think, right now. So, we might be waiting for just a little bit more election day vote here, folks, but it is looking increasingly difficult, I have to say right now, for Democrats, for Jana Sanchez to make this special election runoff. So, Eric, what are your thoughts right now, personally?
This is a good night for Republicans, not a great night for Susan Wright. You would think with all the endorsements she got, she would have done better, but making the runoff is good. As you said before, in these sorts of Republican versus Republican or Democrat versus Democrat runoffs, really it does, the support of the opposing party does matter. The question is who Democrats see as the more preferable candidate of the two. Would it be Susan Wright running with the support of establishment Republicans? Certainly Representative Ron Wright was not a fire and inflammatory person in Congress. Would they be willing to support her? Would they be willing to support Jake Elzy, who does not have the Trump endorsement, is possibly more Trumpy on some issues, but in other issues it appears to be a little bit more moderate. I think it's going to be interesting to see how things go here. I think I really want to see it more before we decide who that second person is. But I think we can say for sure, I'd rather be LZ right now than Sanchez. Sanchez is attracting virtually no support from the Republican areas. And if Tarrant is all in and she's not where she needs to be, we can basically call this thing. But we can say that Susan Wright will make the runoff here and will be the top finisher in all likelihood, although we still need to wait for more for Ellis and Navarro. But she is at least making the runoff. So very good shot for her. 1 and 2 shot, you could say, given she's will be one of 2 candidates in determining the winner here.
Yeah, I mean, this is continuing to look like that it is a continued struggle here for the Democratic candidates here. I think it's a bit of a surprise. I did not think that's what we expected. I think we were looking at a Wright v. Sanchez runoff as the most likely option going in tonight, but it's looking like Jake Elzy, the Republican state senator from Ellis County, will be looks like he is more likely to not potentially to take that second spot, which would be, I mean, that would, not, we had it at likely Republican, obviously not a sure thing, for obviously a pretty likely thing for Republicans, but now if LZ, we do confirm him to take that second spot, that'll be the ball game right there, and this will I can hold no matter what.
Yeah, this goes from like, if there's a column beyond safe Republican, because you can't really be safe Republican when there's 2 Republicans, there'd be like a different call. I don't know what the column be. Uncontested Republican, Republican versus Republican, 100% Republican, like what with a platinum Republican? I don't know. Whatever it would be, it's that, because if there's no Democrat running, there's no chance a Democrat wins this race. You can't really get much more certain than that. The question would be whether it would be leans right or leans LZ.
We try to be strictly uncertain at this website with our words, but we're gonna wait for maybe another update or 2 here still, folks. So still tune in with us here for maybe the next 24 minutes. But we have confirmed though that Susan Wright is heading towards the runoff election race here. Susan Wright will be headed towards the runoff party.
Is RRH doing something? Let's see if RRH has a Tarrant map. Although I want to specifically, after this is through map, I've gotten into precinct mapping. I want to map specifically the Lassiter votes and see if those come from the areas of the county with more African American voters in it. That'd be my guess. The reason I say that is back in November, we had the Georgia special election. And polls showed Raphael Warnock as having a decisive advantage in that jungle primary, which he did. The problem is they underestimated the black support for other black candidates, like Deborah Jackson. She got, I think, about 8% of the vote and was polling at 2%. The reason I say that is that's kind of the error we're talking about here. I don't think Sean Laster was predicted to do more than 2-3%, but she's actually polling better than prominent Democrats here. And she's an African-American woman. That's one possibility. Another possibility is people just missed it. Maybe her name was higher up on the ballot. Maybe people just like the name Lassiter. Maybe there's some voters that just didn't want to vote for someone named Sanchez. I don't know. But I think out of all these possibilities, the African-American makes the most sense. In terms of groups that are underpolled, underrepresented in polling and tend to be less responsive, black voters are right up there with rural white voters in terms of being missed, having these sorts of trends being missed. If you look at these recent jungle special election primaries, that's just one possibility here. That's the one I think is most likely. I could be wrong. Maybe there's some other reason that Sean Laster is doing better, but there was no indication she was going to be in the top 5. To put it that way, there was no indication of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and you got to say, Lydia Bean getting just under 4% of the vote right now. Huge underperformance right now for her. She was endorsed by many of the unions, and she was mostly considered the second Democratic candidate. That's a big flop for her. She's going to be the 4th Democratic candidate right now. It looks like on the list, not only finishing behind Sanchez and Lassiter, but also behind Tammy Allison, who's got 5.2% of the vote right now, according to Decision Desk. So that's an interesting result there too.
Again, we're waiting for just a little bit more. We want to see a little bit more. I want to see what Tarrant County. I want to see the rest of Tarrant County before we make a definitive judgment on that second seat. But if you just look at the basic math at the moment, right now, Yana Sanchez is getting 16.1% in Tarrant County, and she has 13.8% of the vote right now. You compare this to the other two, Ellis County and Navarro County. Ellis County, apparently, Washington Post is saying Ellis is all in. I'm going to make sure that's correct from the Texas Board of Election website.
I don't know. They have not done a good job of updating at the Texas Board of Elections tonight. Not going to lie.
Yeah. I don't know if Ellis is all in. Again, I'm going to check just to make sure. DDHQ says they're not, so I'm going to trust DDHQ here. But she's doing horrifically in Ellis and Navarro, which makes sense because those are very, very Republican counties, and you would not expect a Democrat to be getting a ton of votes in those counties.
Yeah, you certainly don't.
But again, for those who are watching at the moment, again, I'm going to just say in order here who is in the top five, because those are the five most important ones. Susan Wright, Republican, 17.2%. We projected her to make the runoff. Jake Elzy, 15.2%, also a Republican. Yana Sanchez, 13.8%, Democratic candidate. Brian Harrison, 11.9%, a Republican. Sean Lassiter, 8.9%, a Democrat. Those are what it is at the moment. According to Decision Desk, I think different ones. I think New York Times and Washington Post say Ellis is all in. DDHQ says it isn't. Regardless, the two portions we're really looking for, Tarrant and Navarro. Ellis is LZ land. We've always known that the Ellis is going to be LZ land because that's where he's from. That really does matter in elections like these. The question is Navarro, where Susan Wright is doing really well, and Tarrant, where Yana Sanchez is ahead. And I believe we're going to welcome back Harrison, who's going to jump on here in a second. There we go. Hey, Harrison, welcome back. I believe he's still muted. Regardless if he can hear us, we've again projected Susan Wright will make the runoff. The question is who that second seat goes to, because there's two of them. Two people make the runoff out of this. At the moment, this is a massive underperformance for Democrats. If you've just tuned in or if you've missed what we've been saying here, Joe Biden carried the Tarrant County portion of this district by 12 points. And the Democratic candidate for Congress carried it by 5 points. Republicans are currently carrying that portion by 7 points. Give you an idea of what's going on tonight. The rural portions are voting similarly, 5-7 points ahead of where they did in the 2020 election. Part of this could be,
guys, but I've seen the updates, and this has turned into quite an interesting race. So I decided to come back for the conclusion here.
Yeah, awesome. So again, as we were saying, Susan Wright is projected. We're waiting for that second spot. Yep. We're really, to put it bluntly, this is a very, very bad night for Democrats in Texas. Although you could say that about pretty much any night. You could say that about pretty much any night for Democrats in Texas, aside from 2018. They've really not done a great job historically, and this election is no exception. It is looking more and more likely that this will be a lockout. Republicans are winning this vote 24-25 points in a seat that voted for Donald Trump by 3. Obviously, this is by far the biggest Republican overperformance of this cycle we've seen so far. If this overperformance carries to New Mexico, which it almost certainly will not, that would be enough for Republicans to flip that seat.
And this is again, it's a much bigger performance than we saw in 2020 for Ron Wright on the congressional ballot as well. And he was still running around ahead of Trump.
Mm-hmm. What I would say for viewers, the big takeaway here is that Texas was always the continuing thing I've heard from people in Texas is that Texas is not like Trump, but that does not mean that Texas is not like Republicans. Texas is still very, very much a Republican state, Republican-leaning state. Democrats have not won a statewide office in Texas in at least a decade, probably longer. The Democratic Party there missed a lot of opportunities in 2020. with House districts that majority of them voted for Beto in the 2018 Senate race, and now all of them held in this cycle.
In many cases, a lot of those congressional races, some of which were expected to flip to the Democrats in 2020, the Republicans just ended up doing better than they did in 2018.
Yeah, there were no surprise Democratic wins. There were surprise Republican near wins, like in all of the RGD seats.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was no shocking
going back to this race at the moment, looking at the New York Times, we're really waiting on Navarro to catch up. And Wright has clearly been projected to establish that first place finish lead. So my prediction was at least half right on Wright making the runoff. As for Sanchez and Elsie, the gap between the two candidates has increased. It's grown slightly since I was last on here, but we're still going to have to wait on that last 6% of votes out of Tarrant and the last 27% of votes out of Navarro. But given Navarro's smaller population, most of the votes here are in, and I think Ellis is close to 100% in, if I'm correct. And it's going to be interesting.
And I want to correct what I said because I have multiple people correcting me on this. Democrats have not won a statewide election in Texas since '94, which is incredible when you think about it. In that span of time, Republicans have won statewide races in California. Democrats have won statewide races in South Carolina in that time, Tennessee, North Carolina, Florida. Florida. They won statewide in Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma have all had Democratic races during that period of time. The one state that hasn't is Texas.
Address. I didn't want to leave. We had dinner guests over that we haven't seen in a while, and they were staying, and they just left so I could come back. That's all. But I'm happy.
Again, we're doing this on our free time.
I hate missing elections, so I'm glad that it worked out.
Yeah, we're doing this on our free time. This is not a day job for us. Someone mentioned even Wyoming. Even Wyoming. South Dakota has been closer to flipping state. South Dakota has had statewide races go to Democrats in that period of time. The level of ineptitude of the Texas Democrats is really without parallel. The only modern competition for it is the Florida Democrats and the California Republicans in recent years. Texas Republicans they win. That's what they do. And we're seeing it right now. We're waiting just a little bit longer. Out of an abundance of caution.
But we will say that we would rather be Elsie right now in the second place spot than Sanchez, which is ultimately a huge blow to the Democrats if you look at the total composition of the electorate in this race, which is a competitive seat on paper. Like Eric said, if this holds going into New Mexico 1, then that is a toss-up race that could be won by Republicans. Yeah,
keep in mind here, the difference in votes right now between the top candidates is between Elsie and Sanchez is about 800 votes, 700 votes. So that's why we're being cautious here. A lot of votes out of Tarrant could change things, but really, I would not want to be.
There aren't that many votes left out of Tarrant, though. That's the problem.
And that's the only place where Yana Sanchez can gain votes is out of Tarrant.
Yeah, she's not going to gain out of Navarro County, and that's where we have the most. Wow.
If I am the Texas Democrats right now, I am going to Sean Lassiter and Tommy Allison and getting very angry at them because they're very close to getting into the top two here. Multiple questions here. Is Ellis County finished? I have no idea. Texas Board of Elections says no. DDHQ says no. And New York Times and Washington Post say yes. So it's a choose your own adventure.
This again reinforces why open primaries are dumb, because you have a divided field, it stops a whole party from being able to compete in the general election, which essentially prevents a whole half of the electorate from being fairly represented and having a general election candidate. And that goes for both sides. That's part of the reason why I'm generally not that supportive of that kind of system. But everyone is open.
Washington Post no longer says Ellis County is done for what it's worth.
Yeah, New York Times says 94% done on Times, which is close to finish.
Yeah, in terms of proportion of votes, Navarro has the most votes left outstanding, but the most percentage of votes. But in terms of actual votes, it's probably still Tarrant that has the most actually left.
So someone mentioned earlier, we were talking about 1994 and the last Democratic victory, which coincidentally also happened in a Republican year. And I made a map of it not long ago. And it was Bob Bullock's reelection race in the lieutenant governor's election. And really the story of how Bullock and Bush essentially worked together. And Bullock was almost a mentor to the younger Bush in terms of governing the state. Bullock had a lot of influence as lieutenant governor, but ultimately, even while Ann Richards, the incumbent, lost in 1994, Bullock still managed to win in a landslide. And that's the state Democratic victory that we were talking about in the comments here. But yes, it's true. Texas Democrats have not had very good luck as of late. Yeah, once Tarrant is fully in, I think we'll be able to make a call here because, again, Sanchez is not going to be getting getting votes out of the two Republican counties, Ellis and Navarro, both of which are also almost entirely in. So unless some miracle can garner the 1.5% that Sanchez would need to take the lead in Tarrant, it's just hard to see. But I think by 10:30 we'll have a projection in the second spot.
Still really waiting for these election day votes here. We're still waiting here, folks. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen here. We're just going to have to wait. It's really just it's still a matter of just waiting for a little bit more updates to come in. That's really where we're right now happen.
And I would say we probably get an update if going off their schedule in probably 10 minutes, which would be 10:30, would be probably when we get an update on that.
And I'm going to be honest. Again, I think that update, if it doesn't bode well for Sanchez, will be the end of the line. We'll be able to make a call.
Yeah, we'll be able to announce immediately. Basically,
yeah.
Sanchez needs to get a lot of votes, and the only reason we're not calling is out of an abundance of caution because this is a very close race right now. This is still 2 points, 800 votes, 700 votes. Weirder things have happened. I mean, just look at Missouri. Last year, we had the congressional district, the primary, that flipped. Everyone had called it for Lacey Clay and then had to undo their calls, including us, and when Cori Bush pulled ahead. That we're just waiting basically to see if anything from Tarrant comes out. If not, Yana Sanchez is done.
Yep.
And I would put the odds of that more like 8, almost like 90 to 10. We're just doing this out of an abundance of caution.
Yeah, if that next update comes and LZ's still in second place, then it's over, and our coverage will be wrapping up with an official second place projection.
I have a numbers update, Harrison.
All right, this might be enough. Go ahead.
So it looks okay. Decision Desk HQ is now reporting Ellis County as 100% in on election day. We officially are getting, according to Decision Desk, 100% in from Ellis County election day vote. Jake Elzy finishes with 25.6% of the vote. Susan Wright finishes with 21.5% of the vote. And Brian Harrison takes 19.1% of the vote in Ellis County. Yana Sanchez only got 8.8% of the vote. And Sean Lassiter did get 4% of the vote there. So might be a sign with the updated numbers. Susan Wright gets okay. And then wait. A drop just happened while I was waiting here.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say.
Okay. Susan Wright has taken the lead in Tarrant County. In overall,
it's done. It's over. It's over.
That's the end of Sanchez. All hope is lost, and we can officially project from the Elections Daily Elections team that the runoff will lock out the Democrats in what has been an abysmal combined performance for that party. And the runoff will take place in a swing district, mind you, between Susan Wright and Jake Elzy, which will probably result in a rematch of the 2018 runoff between Ron Wright and Jake Elzy, where Ron Wright won by winning Tarrant County. But if Sanchez is not winning Tarrant County anymore and Ellis is in, then it's done. Navarro County is not going to magically save Sanchez. So with that, I would say that our coverage is going to wrap up soon. But before we wrap up, I think we should just have a discussion going over the results, what happened, and the implications. So feel free to butt in, guys.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
this is an atrocious performance. To put it bluntly, this is an atrocious performance by Democrats. You can't sugarcoat this. This is truly appalling in terms of the performance here. This is a seat that we've said this multiple times. It was within 3 points. You should have a candidate in the runoff, and they will not have a candidate in the runoff. I mean, it's as simple as that. There's just absolutely no reason for them not to be competitive.
That last Tarrant drop is bad. The fact that Susan Wright, I mean, Sean Lasseter has now taken 11.5% of the vote in Tarrant County, and Janice Andrews only has 16% of the vote in Tarrant County right now. If you want to point to a sign of why Democrats aren't making a runoff of Janice Sanchez, I think you have to point to that right there. I have to say, I think Navarro is still out there. We'll see LZ gain some votes from that. I doubt we're going to see a Democrat make this runoff here like we've called.
Yeah, it's all over. We projected it. It's going to be a runoff between Jake Elzy and Susan Wright. A really good night for Republicans. Even if you look past the RVR here, the raw percentage of vote going to Democrats, this is a Republican plus 24 seat right now. That's what the vote is here right now. Even in the House race, this is a 9-point race. This is an 8-point race, something in that range. That is a massive swing that, if replicated in other special elections, would flip seats. And I don't want to say it would do that, but if you look at Democratic special elections in 2018, where were the races where we started seeing stuff like this happen? It was in the opposite. It was in Republican seats where they were underperforming. Right now, this is in Republican seats they're overperforming. New Mexico 1 will be a very important seat to watch, because if Republicans can come close in that thing, even 10 points, even within 10 points, 55 to 45, really good night for them. If they somehow make that thing competitive within 5, within 8, I would be setting off alarm bells at the DCCC in particular. Just a really, really not a great performance.
Yeah. And with that, I think we'll begin to wrap up our coverage. You can join us again for our coverage of the runoff between Jake Elzy and Susan Wright after our coverage of the New Mexico 1 special election. And ultimately, yeah, I think this has proven to be an interesting night. It certainly, besides Susan Wright making the runoff, did not really meet our expectations going into this race. But whatever party you are, we appreciate you watching the stream, and we appreciate your continuing support of Elections Daily. And sorry if I made anyone upset by kind of getting angry at open primaries with the jungle primary system, blanket primaries.
Again,
saw a tweet about that, but again, I wasn't trying to sound rude to any political movements. That's all.
Yeah, and so before we go off for the night, and we may stay on until I guess 10:30, just out of an abundance of time. Thank you guys for watching. I did not expect us to get this much support for this stream, of all elections, for this. Really, really, really appreciate your support. If you really like what we do, subscribe to our channel. We've had multiple people do it. I mean, absolutely wild what's going on. And if you really like what we're doing, you can go to our Patreon. Our Patreon is patreon.com/electionsdaily. We're starting to roll out benefits this month. If not, just go ahead and follow us on Twitter, electionsdaily.com, where we post articles for all your favorite elections, international and American. And stay tuned to hear as we'll cover additional ones, including New Mexico 1, which I think is now the most highly anticipated special election in several years, I would think, after tonight.
Yeah, we want to just again thank you for the continued support, folks. Keep with us here. We've got a lot more to cover here in the coming days as we get closer and closer to 2021 and to the November elections. Keep with us here for Virginia and New Jersey coverage. My good friend Harrison up there is running the New Jersey coverage. I'm running the Virginia coverage. you're interested in both of those races, and I recommend you do stay with us here as we get to the night.
Yep, we're very excited for that and appreciate all of the support. So thank you guys and have a good night.